Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Reap the Spoils. I'm Mark Sullivan.
I'm Delilah Lugo.
And I'm Jason Kwasnicki.
Delilah, what are we talking about today?
Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree.
Ooh, I think you mean Skidoo of the Erdtree.
Tattoo of the Erdtree.
uh, Reap the
How
Spoils.
uncultured. It clearly is saying Shadow Tree.
Ye old Shadow Tree. Reap the
Clearly that's
Spoils.
what it was meant to say.
Reap the Spoils! It's a monthly spoiler cast. We play a game or we watch a thing that's usually related to video games, and we come back here and we spoil it. We'll spoil everything from the narrative to the gameplay to whatever we want to talk about. We're just gonna spoil the hell out of this thing.
We'll spoil the menu if we have to, okay?
Yeah, well, we will spoil the menu.
Spoil the shit out of that menu.
Spoilers, it hasn't changed much from the original game, if at all. I don't think there was any like new menus or anything. Anyway, yeah, so this month we're talking about Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, which is a DLC to the critically acclaimed video game Elden Ring.
You might have heard of it.
You may have heard of it. If you're a capital G gamer, you've probably at least seen something of Elden Ring. All right. Are you guys ready for a very, very, like, extremely, exceedingly brief history lesson on Shadow of the Erdtree?
Yes.
Cool. Like, literally, just Elden Ring. It came out February 25th, 2022. We talked about it. There's an episode out there that we recorded on. Go listen to it. This DLC, Shadow of the Erdtree, was announced in February 2023, about a year later. It was kind of like a 1-year anniversary, like, surprise, we're making a DLC kind of thing. And it finally released on June 20th, 2024, over a year later. Once again, to critical acclaim. People really, really liked this DLC. Did we like this DLC?
I did.
Okay. Jason?
Yeah.
So, I was just letting Delilah roll because I thought she was going to get really excited. But yeah,
No,
I liked it.
Yeah,
Well,
it was
so
cool. It was
just to preface, like, I'm sleep deprived. I haven't played the DLC in a while. And also I had a hard day at work, but I do remember very fondly enjoying this DLC, although there were things about it that I did not enjoy as much as I did the original game, which we'll get into.
Yeah, it was
That's
interesting going because I didn't watch anything regarding this DLC before I played it, and it was
Yeah.
interesting seeing how actually divided the hardcore From Software community is about this game. Just going through all the different videos, but yeah, I'm kind of with Delilah where I very much enjoyed it. Testament to that is this is the first game we've talked about I can remember where I wasn't the last one to finish it right before we recorded the episode. I finished it weeks ago. Mark was lagging behind.
Life's busy, man. What can I say?
But yeah, I have a feeling Delilah and I are going to agree on a lot of things that we liked and things we disliked. And honestly, unlike our original episode on the base game where we spent like 3 hours delving into the lore, I feel like there's more to talk about gameplay wise, both for this game and just FromSoft games as a whole, Souls games.
The exciting thing about this one was there were significantly less repeated bosses, which made me very happy.
Yeah.
Because that was a big gripe I had with original Elden Ring, was you go into a dungeon and you fight the same like stone cat thing boss
With a different weapon.
yeah, maybe with a different weapon or like slightly different attack patterns, but it's overall the same boss. Or you fight the Godskin guys either alone or in a pair or whatever, like for the umpteenth time.
Yeah.
None of that's here, which was something I really like. I don't know where we're gonna land on like certain aspects, but I guess in contrast to you guys, I kind of enjoyed this DLC more than I enjoyed the base game.
Oh,
Probably because
okay.
it's smaller and you weren't trying to platinum it.
Yeah, well, luckily there's no trophies for this DLC because From Software typically doesn't add trophies for their DLC. But I did still
They do.
100% it. They did for Bloodborne, and that I think was because it was a Sony technically a Sony first party like IP.
Mm.
Yeah,
I think that
Shuhei Yoshida invited Miyazaki over for friendly tea and then pulled out a knife. You must have a platinum in this game.
like you have to add trophies to this DLC. No others, just this one. But yeah, this didn't have any trophies, which I guess relieved this thing a little bit. But I still did 100% it because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss any side quests or anything. And
I think it would have been cool if they at least had boss related trophies, but at the end of the day, it didn't stop me from 100%ing the game.
I
right,
think,
right.
well, actually, it wouldn't have spoiled anything because they do have like hidden trophy features now.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
exactly.
Anyway, I guess, final spoiler warning. I guess we're to just give a heads up. We will probably spoil aspects of the original Elden Ring, and we're definitely going to spoil Shadow of the Erdtree because that's what this podcast is all about. Spoiling things, reaping the spoils. So, final warning, if you haven't played Elden Ring, if you haven't played Shadow of the Erdtree, I implore you not to listen further and go play those things before you listen to us. All
Sure.
right. I guess let's get into it. Let's talk about the plot here. Um, I saw, or I was provided a Reddit link with from a friend of mine. Shout out to my friend Bella, who I know is listening. She is like an Elden Ring like lore expert. She showed me the maps for the original game and this overlaid, and basically that big blank space in the middle of Elden Ring's map is where this map fits in, like
Yeah, where
perfectly.
there's like a little cloud. It's supposed to be hidden, but it's like weird. It's like randomly. There's
Yeah.
just one like cloud in the sea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, I guess I feel like I didn't pick up on this entirely. I mostly picked up on directly on Miquella's whole quest. But there's a lot to talk about with Marika as well. I don't know where you guys want to start. Do you want to start with Miquella or Marika? Which would you prefer?
I
I
feel like
guess
Mikola. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say Mikola too, just because that's like the most obvious plot point in the game.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, and we sure know now why to get to this DLC, you had to kill Radahn and then kill Mohg
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
before you could enter the Realm of Shadow. We kind of find out uh Mohg didn't kidnap Miquella and try to use him. Miquella kind of orchestrated the whole damn thing so that he could use Mohg to resurrect Radahn. Um that's really interesting. I don't remember where we kind of fell on speculating or what even the community speculated about Miquella and Mohg and that whole that whole
I
plot point or the lack thereof plot point in the original. Go ahead, Delilah.
I think we assumed that like Moog was the aggressor in the situation, considering there was like the cocoon of Mikola, and he also seemed more menacing, I suppose. And then I think when trailers started to come out on this DLC, Mikola kind of presented to be more like, if you've ever read or watched Berserk, Griffith, who
Yes.
is like seemingly charming and very pretty and things like that, but is also extremely menacing and basically a giant.
Menacing is a very light way of putting it.
Yeah, he's like the king of demons, basically, and he presented more to be like that, and while I would say there is some elements like that for Mikola, ultimately Mikola seems more like just a manipulative bastard in like after playing the DLC, and I like him a lot less than I thought I would.
I mean,
Yeah,
is anyone in a FromSoft game truly likable?
Yes, I love Radahn. I always loved Radahn.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. And then when this happened to him, I was just like, "Oh, my poor baby boy."
Well, what I find interesting, so Radahn was born of Radigan and Renala,
Yeah.
and only I guess half brother to Miquella. So did we ever find or are there any clues to like a deeper connection between the two of them? Because for him to promise Radahn to be his consort if he ascends to godhood, I don't know. It's just like I wouldn't have expected that kind of relationship between the two of them.
No, but
Okay.
yeah, it was very incesty, you know.
Oh wow, incest in Elden Ring? Are you sure?
Well, I
Well,
mean,
wait till I tell you about Mikola and Saint Trina.
yeah, with the revelations here about, you know, Mikola literally bending people's wills and whatnot, which was kind of implied slash hinted at, but now it's kind of this DLC kind of makes it official. There's a lot of like mystery that Mikola was shrouded in, and a lot of speculation on what specifically the aims were. And a lot of those threads, I guess, we'll talk about as we go along. We're just completely trapped. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, it opens up a whole bunch of new questions talking about incest with in the first game. Um, oh my god, having a brain fart. His sister, or her
Melania.
sister,
Melania.
Melania. Sorry. Yeah, because if you remember, the whole opening cinematic is Melania fighting Radon,
Right.
and that. So it's like you start it kind of recontextualizes a lot more than you would think. There's more aspects we can delve into as we go along, but
Well, yeah, I guess that kind of begs the question of do we have a different idea now of why Melania and Radon were at odds and why she kind of infected him with the Scarlet Rot? Do you think maybe she
and
wasn't happy about him being the promised consort?
one would assume that Mikola was kind of using his sister if he can bend wills.
I mean, that's
He's been
that's
using everyone in the game.
Yeah,
well, his sisters that's kind of a bold take, I'd say. And I mean, it's I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that's interesting, and I haven't thought
just
about
because
that.
she's described as sort of Mikola and she describes herself that way.
Hmm.
Right.
Um, but
So, what,
why?
like, did Mikola have her try to kill or successfully somewhat
See,
kill
I don't see
Radon?
why she would. What aim would he? Because if he ascended to godhood, why would he need Radon to die? I'm kind of
Because
leaning
Radon,
toward.
because Radon didn't want to be the consort. I thought was the situation.
Oh, is there something that says that? I don't remember seeing that. Oh boy, now we're gonna have to do some fact checking on the spot.
I thought that was the whole reason that he wanted or he needed Moog to revive him or something along those lines. Granted, I'm operating off of like very brief summaries, my interpretation of what I saw during my gameplay. So I could be wrong about that. But my interpretation was that he manipulated Moog because he needed to resurrect Radon in such a fashion that he would be able to. Because I thought that the whole thing was that he was unable to fully bend Radon to his will.
See, I just thought. I don't. My view of it is that he must have had to die
For
in order
Mikola to
to
control
become.
him.
Not even for the control. I don't know. You're taking it in a much more sinister way than I ever thought about it. I wouldn't think that I wouldn't have thought, and I still don't think that Mikola or that Radon was against becoming his consort. I never got that impression, and I don't know what supporting evidence there is for that. And maybe
Only
if there is something like I'll come around on that idea. I'm guessing that he had to die and then be reborn, I guess, in the realm of shadow in order to become his consort when Mikola ascended.
Perhaps.
Um, but
Again, this is Mark has probably looked at this and read and listened to a whole lot more than me. I'm going off of very surface level, rudimentary lore, a few lore vids, and my own interpretation of things.
yeah, and
yeah,
go
there's
ahead, Delilah.
nothing explicitly said about the intentions, I think, behind Melania or even Verdun. The only intention we know is Mikola's intention, and everyone else, like, we don't know whether they're being manipulated by him or whether it was from their own will. But you can kind of see during the Radon fight in the second phase that there's some level of control that's taken over him. Like, you know how in that fight Mikola puts like a charm on you
Yeah.
and you have like this thing above your head and your like character is shining in like this golden light kind of. I feel like Radon also had this like golden aura around him during that second phase, which demonstrated to me at least some sort of manipulation. Also, I don't see why Radon would want to die to like service him into godhood, especially considering like that's your half brother, like that. Like if it was Ronnie, like sure, maybe it's like, all right, homegirl, like you're my sister, like let's do this. But like there was a lot of like bad blood between Radagon and I mean not Radagon, Renala and getting like cheated on by Radagon with Marika, and I would imagine that would create some turmoil between Mikola and Radahn. So I don't see why he would want to die for him just to ascend to godhood. Well, why would anyone want to die? You know what I mean? Like, well, how does that benefit him?
Well,
Yeah,
that's
the whole thing.
kind of
Oh, sorry, go.
no. This is where I go back to this kind of hidden relationship or unexpected relationship between the two. It's kind of called into question. With them only being half brothers, I'm kind of a little, interested to know more about that, because I don't. It's never a conclusion I would have come to, is I guess what I'm getting at.
Yeah. And I would imagine, like, if Mikula is not just manipulative in terms of power, like being able to charm people, the incentive for Radahn, if he did do it by free will, is, oh, I can come back to life. So maybe he was Melania, to Jason's theory, was manipulated into killing Radahn so that Radahn can feel the motivation to be merged with put into Mohg's physical form and then become like OP Radahn, like his truest form, the strongest form. Because who would want to stay dead in the Shadow Realm and not live their life?
Just calling this out, like I'm kind of looking up. I'm looking up on the side just to see if there's supporting evidence, and frankly, it would be a lot of time to just read through all these damn posts.
Yeah, don't worry about it. That was just what I was coming in here thinking from.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thought, and I who knows which one is right. It seems like there might be evidence supporting both sides or both arguments.
And I guess I really only brought it up just because the way they dropped threads and kind of the story, quote unquote, that they told with Mikola here, makes you rethink and recontextualizes a lot. Like one of the threads that never really got brought up was this kind of not mystery. It's alluded to in the base game that Mikola kind of wanted to have this council, if I remember correctly, with all of the big players, to try to find some sort of peace. So now with what we know now in mind, unless FromSoft kind of dropped that as, no, that was just a nothing burger, that was never a thing. If that was indeed a thing, though, what was he trying to get all the major players together in one place where he could kind of mind control them all and in one shot? Who knows?
We'll see. I mean, I don't know. I'm not thinking of Mikola as nearly as manipulative as you guys are. If that was the case where he wanted, and I think I remember what you're talking about, he probably did want to negotiate some sort of peace. It was impossible, and that's kind of what led him to go through because remember, his end goal is to usher in, what did I put? The age of compassion. Right.
There's nothing more manipulative than that, in my opinion.
Yeah, right. I think Delilah and I are on the same page on that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't disagree, guys. But my point being is he wants to usher in this forced utopia. I'm taking that as because his peace negotiations, what you just said, Jason, didn't work. There was no talking it out. So he was going to force them to just be peaceful. And the way his plan was set into motion to ascend to godhood in the realm of shadow, however that would have worked. That's kind of that. Going off of that, that's kind of what I'm going with. What the Age of Compassion was all about.
Yeah, if the Age of Compassion is something to be good, sure, there can be an argument that his intentions weren't like quote unquote bad, but that doesn't mean he wasn't manipulative. In fact, like his power by nature is manipulative because he's like charming people, even people that wouldn't necessarily side with him, into his own personal values, which I think is wrong, which is why I always vibed with, speaking of Elden Ring characters I love, Ronnie's ending, which is the Age of Stars, which felt like very free. Like you get to go wherever you want, do whatever you want. It's your own will, it's your own way. Like you choose, it's based on your choice. Whereas the other ones were like forcing certain religions or ideologies into the world, which affected a lot of people, which is why the omens were always treated like shit. And the most important omen at this point would be Moog, who I feel completely bad for, because it's like, damn, like he he already had it bad, and he has it the worst because he had no choice in the matter, and he was the person that was the most manipulated. Clearly, Radon
Yeah,
is up for
clearly.
question, but Moog, it's like, nah, Mikola like definitely fucked up on Moog.
Yeah. Yeah, Mikola's intentions were good. It was his plan, how he intended to enact those intentions, that was like pretty much like pure evil. Um just manipulating all these people into enact, including the player, realistically including us, like
Yeah.
killing Radon and killing Moog served his plan, and we unknowingly, unwillingly, probably unplanned on From Software's part at the time, I would say, or at least somewhat unplanned, kind of furthered his whole plot. So
Yeah.
yeah, Mikola may have had good intentions in the end, but he's still a right son of a bitch.
Yeah.
So along the lines of I guess Mikola's plot line, we've also got we got a little more context for Saint Trina, which kind of plays more into one of the character side quests.
Folier.
Yeah, Tholier, whatever, however you want to pronounce it. Um, it's another Marika Radigan situation. They are the same person split into two.
Right, Saint
Um,
Trina. I think that's part of why I see Mikola as malicious, because of the Saint Trina thing, where I saw Saint Trina as his good portion, and what we end up fighting, and what is affecting the world is the evil portion of him.
okay, so you think Saint Trina is the good half, whereas the Mikola left behind is the bad?
Right, because Saint Trina straight up tells you, like, kill him. He doesn't want to attain godhood. That's not what he wants. Stop him.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Did you guys both, I guess, complete that well, I guess Tholier side quest? I guess you don't
Yeah.
have to see to do the Saint Trina thing, but
Yeah,
because
I think
theoretically, I think you can just go into the stone fissure and then find the crypt and defeat that boss. Yeah.
yeah,
I thought that you only got the dialogue if you like let yourself die like 10 times or however many times it was.
yeah, I just don't remember if like Tholier was really required for that,
Yeah,
but
Oh,
maybe he
I think
was.
you get the dialogue. I think you can get the dialogue from Saint Trina regardless.
Okay.
mm,
I think it's specifically to get Tholier's quest completed so that he shows up as a summon later when you fight
Yeah,
the
to
boss. Yeah.
assist in the battle against um
mm,
Radon, and also against the Mikola's followers.
yeah,
Um
Lady Knight Lita,
yeah. Who are
Needle
all
Knight.
them? Yeah,
Yeah.
Needle Knight. Yeah, which is also interesting that it's kind of a disparate group of characters that you come across. You have Lita, who is a soldier for Melania, Freya, who was a soldier for Radon, a horn scent, an unnamed horn scent, the Ansbach, who served Moog. So it's like all these NPCs, all these like underlings that uh were followers of all these other bosses that are kind of involved with this plot line, now kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Um they're kind of being
At odds with each other.
they're being manipulated for Mikola until you get that message that the rune broke.
Yeah.
The rune being the what he was using to charm everybody. And thinking about that, like theoretically, I would say if he was manipulating Radon fully, breaking that rune would have broken that manipulation. And if Radon wasn't just working with or wanting to be Mikola's consort of his own will, he wouldn't have fought us at the end. That's kind of my take on that.
Yeah, that
Um
makes sense. But again, the motivation could be like, oh, like I will give you life again, you know?
Yeah.
which
Or it
is
could,
not. Yeah.
or it might not even be the motivations of Radon himself. Like I said, bringing him back, because the whole reason he wanted to die in the festival when we fight him in the base game is for his honor. So when he's brought back, we don't even know if that's like real Radon. It could
Well,
just be, some crooked, reanimated form of his corpse that
correct
was twisted by Mikola. We don't know.
correct me if I'm wrong, but part of that was likely due to him losing to Melania and getting cursed with the Scarlet Rod, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. We did give him his honorable death, and then being revived, I feel like doesn't necessarily undo that, especially if
Oh
he's
no,
looking to.
I'm saying his mind as he was in the base game, it might not be the same when he's brought back. But we
Oh,
don't
I
know.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know, and we likely never. Well, actually, there is a lore book coming out for Shadow of the Erdtree, so maybe that'll have all the answers.
Wow.
Who's to say? By now. Um but it was interesting when that great rune broke. I kind of did not know. I thought I did something wrong. Like
Yeah.
I thought I fucked up and did something completely wrong, and turns out no, that's just planned to happen at some point.
Yeah.
I think once you approach the Shadow Keep, I think I
Hmm.
read is when it'll happen.
Hmm.
Yep.
Um, and I didn't really pick up on the fact that that was what marked a pretty big change in all the NPCs.
Quest
Uh,
lines.
yeah, their quest lines, that kind of even just their like what they were saying to you and whatnot. Like I think it was Lita became like extremely skeptical and paranoid of everybody.
Yeah, she asks you if you should kill. You actually get a choice, multiple choice, if she
Yeah,
should kill the horn scent. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, and I think she winds up doing it no regardless of what choice you, because I think you could choose between that or Ansbach, and I think no matter what she picks Horn Scent.
Yeah.
I think that's probably another reason why you liked this one better, because it presents you with a much clearer plot slash game goal, find Mikola, than
Yeah.
just becoming the Elden
I
Lord.
mean, it's
But
also just
also,
shorter. It's also just smaller. It's just like
and but to that point, most of the NPCs and their side quests are kind of grouped
yeah.
together, and
Yeah.
are,
Right.
even though you don't necessarily, you on a first playthrough, you might not know when those markers are for changes
Yeah.
or when you need to do things. It's easier to keep track of than all of these NPCs sprawled across the giant base game map.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree. Um
Yeah.
but a lot of it also is just because it was a lot more digestible of an experience than a 120-hour RPG. This was a tight 40-hour RPG.
And not all, but most of those side quests also kind of culminate in the events of the climax.
Yeah, yeah, because all these followers and furthering their kind of quest lines, it all culminates in who is it? Lita, Freya, Moore, and the and
Dane wasn't in
Dane.
there. Was Dane in
No,
there?
Dane
Yeah.
was one of them, yeah.
Okay.
Fighting against you, and Ansbach and Tholier assisting you against them. Um which I thought was a really cool fight, and it was neat and well done, and probably one of my favorite like NPC summon fights that I've ever seen in
Hmm.
a FromSoft game.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
in general, I really like when this game, and we'll get to it when we talk about gameplay, but I summoned liberally in this DLC.
As did I.
Good. It's
No
a game.
shame.
It's
Do you mean
it's
like NPC summons or
both,
Both.
players?
Yeah.
both.
Because in order to beat Melania in the base game, I had to level up. Um, what's it called? The Mimic tier to +10, in addition to my glorious blasphemous blade.
Mhm.
So that's basically what I ran with for most of the game. We'll talk about, gameplay and
Yeah,
build
yeah,
and
we'll talk.
whatever
Yeah.
later. But yes, I liberally use spirit summons, and again, we'll talk more about that
Oh, I,
gameplay.
I,
Where
I mean,
in
I'm
at times it felt necessary.
yeah, yeah, but I'm saying, but by both, I'm saying that NPCs and other players,
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, if
like,
if you're if you're going up against shit, Bale, the dragon
oh
boss,
Oh
God,
my god,
yeah,
and
he's the best
you're
NPC.
not summoning Dane for that
No.
dialogue you get,
It's
you're missing half.
Egon.
But I'm not even talking again. I'm not talking about NPCs. I'm also talking about like other players, like other people, real people.
Oh
Yeah.
no, I didn't summon any real people now.
Oh, okay. Then I guess I'm the one that truly hit rock bottom and not giving a fuck with
Yeah,
this DLC.
I didn't summon any people, but for like NPC summons, the only reason I didn't summon most of them was because it buffs the health part of the boss if the summon is outside of the boss door, but if it's inside of the boss door, like for Mesmer with Horn Scent or for Bale with Egon, then it's quest related and it doesn't buff. So the game wants you to summon that NPC for
Right.
the
Shit,
quest.
I didn't know that. I didn't know if it was inside it doesn't buff it. I knew it buffed the health from outside.
Yeah. And I honestly feel like the fights were easier without the NPCs because of that. But also, summoning Egon for the Bale fight was like the most epic thing ever.
Oh,
And
Yeah.
Egon. I'm sorry, I said Dane.
yeah, yeah.
I
Sorry.
should have remembered Egon. I was laughing when I saw the name. Once when you enter the
Oh,
dragon
you
area,
thought you were
and
also gonna summon Venkman?
no. I was just, but yes, I was laughing because of Ghostbusters. Like,
But
um.
like, I feel like for those people who are like quote unquote purists, if they just went into Bale without summoning Egon, they just missed like one of the best moments in the game. I feel.
Yeah.
yes, it's one of the best bosses, and that dialogue, yeah.
Yeah, so getting back to the point I was originally trying to make is whenever this DLC did a really good job of having lots of NPC summons for like story related summons for a lot of the bosses, and I really liked that because it's really cool getting that optional dialogue that really kind of makes it feel more like a coherent plot. Like this DLC felt more like a coherent plot than base Elden Ring did, in my opinion. And a lot of that comes down to that quest line with all the followers
Yeah, I
and
agree with you.
summoning them for the fights.
Yeah.
And
I think it's
uh,
also important to remember though that technically this is a subplot within the base game. So like if you're just playing Elden Ring
Yeah.
from the start, this would be kind of a adventure within the greater adventure.
Yeah, I don't think that takes away from what I'm talking about, though.
No, certainly.
If anything, I think it would make Elden Ring now feel a little jarring if you play it again, go to how many boss fights, even like required ones, and there's not really any NPCs to summon. There's not really any involvement from any characters with the plot, so to speak, you know?
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely agree with you because, like I said, I didn't summon them except for quest related stuff. But when after I fought Radahn and I saw Ombox and the Tolier's dead bodies after that fight, I was like, damn, I kind of really wish I would have summoned them to see them fight and like join this final battle with me, you know?
Yeah.
So it does. I agree with you. It does kind of like help the story a lot to summon them. It's just like bring them along, you know?
It kind of reminds me in the base game of spots like Volcano Manor, which is completely optional,
Yeah.
but it feels like its own little thing connected with all these characters within the bigger game.
Yeah.
Who was the son that was associated with Volcano Manor?
Rykard?
That's it. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's where you
Okay.
get Blasphemous Blade. How do you not remember this? Come
Oh,
on.
I'm so that's why that's why that's like your favorite place in all of the game because it gave you your favorite weapon.
Well, that and it was my favorite place just because it was my favorite place. Like, just
That was a
yeah.
cool side quest
And
line.
even though it's a gimmick boss fight, it's still such a fun fight.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean with as far as Mikkela's followers, I mean we could talk about each individual one if we want to, but I feel like we've said most of what we need to say about them. Of the Mikkela's followers, I'd say Ansbach is probably the most compelling. Because I feel like he's the one that's most well, I mean, he fights with you at the end, but like he's also just like the friendliest and I guess most sympathetic out of all of them. He followed Moog, knows that you killed him, but he doesn't like hate you for it, and
Yeah.
is also kind of associated and sympathetic towards some of the other followers, even after the Great Rune breaks, and they're kind of what's the fucking word I'm looking for? Oh my god,
We're all
it's
He
having brain farts today,
it's
man.
the thing that happens in Mass Effect from the goddamn Reapers. What do they do to you?
the
They
mind control.
There's a word for it.
Yeah, I
Why
know.
am I having trouble with the English language right now? This is gonna drive me fucking insane.
Getting old. Getting old.
Indoctrinate.
Indoctrinate. Yes.
Indoctrinate. It's
There you go.
basically indoctrination, and the Great Rune breaks, and the indoctrination ends.
Well,
Jesus Christ.
Ansbach is also the one that goes to the library in
Yeah.
the Shadowkeep, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you help him like find. So he's kind of like reading into and learning the actual history. So
Yeah.
yeah,
But even before, I don't know, even before he really like reads into that, he still is just like a much more friendly character. I feel like we don't really know much about Dane.
No, he's just one punch man. That's all you. That's all you got to know. He's
that's
the
right.
tsundere of Elden Ring.
Today. Yeah, I don't really know what his kind of deal was, but
I think he was just laid as homie. That's all. There was really not much to his quest except to
yeah.
get the martial arts build.
Yeah, really. I mean, if we want, we can move on to Marika because we get a lot more information on Marika kind of from this DLC.
Oh wait, were we gonna talk about Amir as the Count, right?
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Okay. I didn't know
Yeah,
if we were moving on from side characters or.
no. I just want to
Okay.
talk about. I want to finish talking about like the main stuff, the important stuff, and then we can talk about Ymir, and Bale because I do want to talk a little more about Bale. Well, actually, there's not really much more to talk about with Bale. We kind of said all there was. Egon shows up and is a badass. That fight was rough. We'll talk about that in the gameplay, but let's talk about Marika. Did you guys find the shaman village?
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, I know
gorgeous.
Delilah did. Okay, but Jason did too. Cool. Yeah. So, and again, shout outs to my friend Bella because she kind of filled in the gaps that I didn't really realize. But um, seemingly Marika's kind of from that village originally.
hmm
And that the reason she hates the horn scent so much is because in the horn scents, was it the tower in Earleem? Was that their tower?
Belarus,
Oh yeah, Belurat,
Ballarat, yeah.
Belarus,
Belurat.
or
Yeah.
Belurat, whatever.
Anyway, you kind of find out that they stuffed people from the shaman village into jars and really fucked them up. So
Right. It's kind of when you're going through the Shadowkeep, you can see kind of there's some lore readings you can go through where they like lash and whip them, then create pus and create these jar warriors. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, you
which
also got some of that lore. Like if you read the items you get from the Evergels, and
yeah,
also when you saw like the blobs come out of the pots, they were kind of like you were like, oh, they could have been pretty at one point, right? Before they got like decapacitated and shoved into there because they had like long hair and whatever. They were like
mhm.
feminine looking despite looking like blobs.
Yeah, I saw. In doing some reading, ahead of this episode. I Kotaku actually had a really excellent breakdown of a lot of the plot points and lore points, including kind of talking about how if you look at some of the Jar Warriors, they actually kind of, or at least one of them, probably a lot of them, kind of resemble Marika.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And also in that shaman village, you find a lock of her hair, which I, just put the
It's
blinders
really
on and
really
grabbing
good
everything.
for especially for the final fight. Really good to have.
hmm
Did it do something?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
repelled holy damage.
Oh, this is what I fucking get for not reading item descriptions. Cool. Awesome. Excellent. Well,
But yeah, so
um,
it kind of gives a major lore point in that her whole motivation for becoming what she becomes is vengeance.
yeah, basically. And you could also view that missing gap in the map that I brought up at the beginning of the episode. You could also view that as her kind of smiting the Hornset and banishing them to this kind of parallel world that she almost created out of a chunk of the realm of shadow,
Hmm.
because she hated them so much.
And it
Um,
also because in the base game in the normal in the lands between they're known as the Omen, and
yeah,
there's a lot of there's this stigma attached to them, and you kind of get hints throughout through the dialogue, but also reading the lore. and it kind of makes more sense. I mean, aside from just them looking different,
Yeah.
why that stigma is attached to the children of Radagon, America, what, or Godfrey, whoever the children are that are, have the horns.
Yeah, it contextualizes the disdain she has for Moog.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, Marika being from there, that was interesting. I kind of didn't really pick up on it nearly as much as I probably should have. We
The
could also
music
talk.
changes and everything when you get in there. Like it
Mm.
gets all like tender and like the lighting is so golden over the flowers. It was very cool.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes,
it kind
very
of did
beautiful.
stand out, especially when you go past that statue to reach it. Like once you reach that village, it does stand out visually speaking. Um,
Honestly, I was surprised they made it like a secret to find. I mean, I'm not surprised. I understand why, but like it feels like it was something that rather than just go to that gate at the end where you get a bunch of fragments or whatever they're called, they should have just had the fragments, but had the village up there. It should
I
have been
mean,
something more easy to find because unless you already knew, like I did beforehand, that that was a secret passage to roll into, a lot of people would just fly by that, and it's kind of important.
yeah. I mean, if I remember correctly, finding out getting the lore message that Marika and Radigan are the same person was also optional in the base game, right? I don't think you ever need to do that in order to progress it, and I don't know that the game
I mean,
explicitly tells you
you
quite like
don't even
that.
have to go to that area generally to finish the game, but I'm just saying, I feel like it should have been something more, a bit more obvious,
Yeah.
just given how much of a bombshell, not a bombshell, it doesn't really like, it just recontextualizes why, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And then we can also talk about Mesmer, who is another child of Marika and Radigan.
How many more children do these people have?
Well,
Rolana,
again from my
or Rolana is another one.
through well yeah yeah that was Renala was the wife of Radigan.
Rolana.
Rolana,
Rolana.
I'm saying, yeah, is one of the
Oh
bosses here. Yeah, yeah.
wait, yeah, was is Rolana?
Renala is Rolana's sister.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay, didn't know that. That's interesting to know.
Yeah.
I used Rolana's swords quite a bit. That became my second most used weapon in this DLC.
Renala, yeah, she had one of the coolest swords for sure. And Mesmer as well.
It was two swords, man. I was dual
So
wielding
cool, man.
like a keyblade master. Anyway, um Mesmer being another child and of another cursed child of Marika and Radigan, and he's the one that she sends to do the genocide of the Horn Scent, to kind of take revenge on them
Yeah.
and wipe out that village. Also interested, there was more, so I don't remember if we talked about this because I feel like I didn't know about this theory prior to our recording on Elden Ring, but there's more supporting evidence that basically outright confirms that Melina is also a child of Marika and Radigan and
Uh,
is
I think
like
I've heard
another
that.
another
Yeah.
sister of or the kind of I guess counterpart to Mesmer, like how Mikola and Melania are counterpart siblings, so to speak.
Yeah, I've
yeah.
heard something like that.
And
Was
it
that
would make sense because she like got burned and stuff. Like we had to burn her to unlock Crumbling Fair Missoula, was it?
yeah, that yes, yeah. In the Land of Giants, you had to like burn the tree there, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's when you go to that place that you just said that I'm not
And
gonna repeat because oh my god.
that's only after fighting the fire giant, which were kind of like they looked very it looked some kind of similar to the incinerator golems that were all over the realm of shadow. So like it makes sense because this game, like Elden Ring, both the original and this game, use a lot of like environment to connect lore pieces. Like Saint Trina's flowers. You're dealing with like that part. Or if there's a lot of like moons and stars, you're dealing with like Rolana and Rani and things like that. When
Yeah.
you went to the Shadow Village,
Aesthetic motifs that you
yeah.
would associate. Yeah. like the blue, like the darkness, the stars, the blue for all the
The
magic, star magic related
what is that? The
people.
like the royal family or whatever. Like
Yeah.
Yeah,
whole Renala's whole lineage.
Yeah, exactly. And with Shaman Village, you had the two tree sentinels that were there, which were
Mhm.
basically rampant around the capital in the original game. So for there to be that theme of like fire for Melina and also her hair color, and she looks kind of similar to Mesmer a little bit, would make sense, but
there's
it
also
hasn't been
the eye
confirmed.
thing because Mesmer takes out his eye.
Mm-hmm.
That's another really good fucking parallel. I didn't think about the eye.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Right. And the eye was basically, I think, America's Great Rune, like, or it looked like, or not the Great Rune, the Scarred Seal or something, Sword Seal, one of those things. America's Sword Seal or Scar Seal, which was like a talisman that you can use that
Yes, yes,
was
Oh,
you're
connected,
right.
yeah, to America. So maybe Malina had one of those too. But again, it's all speculation because there's nothing that really confirms it. You just kind of put these pieces together based on the aesthetics and the items descriptions.
hmm
But it does it. Yeah, overall though, it makes a ton of sense, especially because they're kind of opposites. Where Mesmer is very much looking for adoration from America, where Melina is kind of on the opposite end.
Hmm.
yeah. She helps you to ascend to become the Elden Lord.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
unless you get that frenzied flame, don't talk to her if you got the frenzied flame. She'll fucking get so mad at you, break up with you on the spot, man. Okay. I mean, I just thought that was interesting, and I like I said, I don't remember us talking about that in the base game episode. I feel like I learned that that was a theory after the fact, so it's kind of interesting that it got further confirmed and um
Speculated.
yeah, it's like it's no longer really a question. There's a lot of supporting evidence here that basically outright confirms it, which is cool. It's cool to see that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, I guess Jason, you want to talk about Emir and that quest line?
But real quick thing though about
yeah,
Mesmer, is that I feel like at the end of doing what he did for his mom, he kind of
Mhm.
felt some shame and guilt, like he felt manipulated by her to do something he probably didn't really want to do.
Oh,
Like he
yeah,
did it to get her adoration, and then later was like, "Oh, what the fuck?"
yeah, she basically banished him to the Shadow Realm to just commit genocide for her.
yep.
Yeah,
And that's
manipulative, just like her son.
yeah, yeah.
Them blondies, man, can't trust them. Beautiful blonde, long hair, you just stay away.
Which is an interesting thematic through line between the two of them, and kind of all the story as a whole.
Yeah,
Just people fucking getting either just their emotions taken advantage of or straight up magic manipulated.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which again goes to what you said in the beginning, Delilah, about Griffith.
Oh yeah.
Oh, the
Berserk,
character
yeah.
from yeah, Berserk. Okay, okay.
Which of course, like Miyazaki said for years that from all the way back to Demon Souls and Dark Souls, like Berserk has been a major influence
Oh
on him.
yeah, I feel like that's like pretty
Yeah.
obvious.
Yeah. They even have a gut sword and everything.
Yeah. All right. Anything else to talk about, like with Marika, Mikola, any of that stuff, before we move on to talk about some of the last few side quests?
Nope. I just
Or
feel for the redheads, man. That's all. I feel for them.
Redhead's getting fucked over everywhere, man.
man,
Even orange cats.
I mean, I guess narratively speaking, yeah, I understand, but I don't know. A lot of these main boss fights, we'll get into it.
Yeah, sure.
All right, Ymir, go ahead, Jason, because I know you want to talk about this one.
But it's not even that I had anything really like profound to say, other than I really fucking enjoyed the storyline, especially if you're going up, exploring, paying attention to the immediate environment
Yeah, so like,
for the revolutions.
What was the deal with Ymir? He wanted to become the mother of hands or whatever.
Yeah, so basically, he's so into the outer gods That's another reason I really like anything to do with the outer guys,
Yeah,
because
you're
it's
you're a
essentially
big
aliens in this fantasy world. They literally crash land into the world via comets, and then it's just weird. It's like a mix
yeah.
of really cool. Who am I thinking of? I can't think of the author off the top of my head for some reason. We're all having brain farts today, but it's a really cool mixture of sci-fi horror with fantasy. But
Mhm.
I did like just the general storyline that, yeah, he's having you go around finding all these finger things
All these
to
finger things.
to ring bells to bring back this fucking eldritch alien god so that he can become the mother of fingers. And if you're paying attention, like I said, to the environment around him, reading the headstone outside in the graveyard, it seems he's trying to bring back his son. I don't remember if it was his son or daughter, but his child. And
Hmm,
you realize the thing that he's cradling as he sits on the throne is his child that he wants to bring back by being the Lord of Fingers
interesting.
or Mother. I guess it would be father. I don't know. I
He
think he
sent
says
he
mother.
the boss
Yeah.
fight was Mother of Fingers.
No, but I think Amir says he wants to become the mother of Fingers.
Well,
Yeah.
when you fight Ymir, the I
Yeah.
don't know if you guys fought him. Title of the boss says
Yes.
Mother of
Oh,
Fingers.
He
okay.
So
become he
I
becomes
missed
the
that.
mother of fingers,
yeah, he
essentially.
becomes.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's all
You
to bring back.
you
I
help
guess my
him
point
become the
is
mother of
that
fingers.
my point. I guess my main point is just that the revelation is that thing, that weird finger he's cradling, is actually his attempt to uh, revive his dead child.
The whole
Interesting.
finger thing is so confusing to me because, like, I know the two fingers is associated with, like, the Golden Order, and the three fingers is associated with the Flame of Frenzy, and then
Yeah.
you're here in the Land of Shadows, and there's, like, three areas for that quest line where that's, like, fingers everywhere,
And that's
and then
associated with the mother of
that's
fingers.
associated with the Mother of
I
Fingers,
mean,
and
it's implied that all the magic in this, almost all the magic in this world, essentially from aliens, the outer god, like Scarlet Rot, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's why he becomes the worldwide Radon becomes the Star Scourge.
Right.
Like, yeah, because it's
yeah.
like, yeah. I mean, yeah. We kind of I think we talked about this a lot in our base episode, like how much the outer gods are basically just celestial beings, celestial gods that kind of
Yeah, and why Renala in the base game, and that whole faction even going into this game with R'Lana, is
mhm,
all the magic. It's so associated with stars. Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, and also in the main game, I think uh Liurnia was the only place that had the fingers, especially by the place where you fight Renala, like one of the libraries or whatever. The Carrion Manor, I think, had them too, but
Like
then they weren't really anywhere else.
when you say the fingers, you mean like the hand enemies?
Yeah, the hand
Oh,
enemies.
I thought they were no, I think they were somewhere else too. But like, there's probably significance to that as well because I feel like I remember fighting them decently far away from like the Carrion Academy. Or what was it? Or yeah, the Academy of
Raya
Rye
Lucaria,
Raya
yeah.
Lucaria. Okay.
Yeah, because in
Um.
addition to the fingers, the stars, the Scarlet Rot, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly, the trees even themselves that give like Marika and all that line, the light power, the trees are not of that world natively either, if I remember correctly. Because
Yeah.
and you
hmm,
even fight, like in this game, one of the bosses is the avatar of it. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
yeah. Where was it that the Burger King guys were back in this? They
That
were
was
somewhere. Was that also in Rolana's
Wait,
like
the Burger King guys specify. I
the
can't remember
fucking
what.
there are the enemies there are the enemies in the Academy of Raya Lucaria that basically are wearing like king masks from like the Burger King. Like
Oh,
they're literally wearing like Burger King
yeah,
masks.
that's in the castle where you fight Rolana, right? I
Rolana,
forget what
yeah.
it's
I
called.
mean that would make the most sense because if she's the sister of Renala, and there's all the she was, thus a disciple of the
Yeah, that's
Academy
called
of
this.
Raya Lucaria.
It's called like the Sky something C note, right?
I don't remember. But I
Because
do remember as the Burger
it's
King guys.
technically optional, I believe. Like you can technically proceed to the Shadow Keep by going around it, but the
Fighting
quickest
Rolana, you don't have to fight Rolana.
I don't think
I
so. I
don't
think
think you
Yeah, what
do.
actually were the required bosses of this DLC? I know
it's only
there.
a few. You can. I
Yeah,
think it's only
it's
like
like
3
the
of them.
Hippo, Mesmer, and Radon, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, and what were the
Uh,
other?
I think you have to fight Romina to get to
Yes,
Radon.
Ramana. Yeah, Ramana. You have to fight to get to that thing to rebuild the bridge, right?
Yeah. Who's the first boss that we fought? I think mine was Renala, the first like main boss, and you don't have to fight her.
Hold
The
on,
golden
yeah.
The
hippo.
first one I did was the Divine Beast.
Oh yes, that one you have to
Yeah,
fight too.
the
Wait,
Divine
do you have to
Beast
fight
in.
the? I don't think you had to fight the Divine Beast, did you?
Really?
I think you
Yeah.
do. I think you have to
So,
fight the Divine Beast and Mesmer in
so
order
okay,
to rebuild the bridge.
okay. So I have a list up that I actually found this I think on Reddit, and it was like a checklist. The only main bosses that you have to fight do include Rolana, that golden hippo before Mesmer, Romana, and Radon.
Okay.
Um,
Wow.
the yeah, because I'm pretty sure you don't even have to do like Bellurat or anything. Like that's
Actually,
a
yeah.
totally optional thing.
Now that you mention it, because when you finish Bellarat, you climb the tower, but it's blocked off by the shadow.
Yeah,
But if you think about it, once you go through Ramana and rebuild the bridge, it takes you straight there. So yeah, technically, it's like 2 different ways of getting to the same place.
and is
So
it
Mhm.
yeah,
bad that I don't even remember Ramana? Who the hell was that?
it's a
The
scarlet rat
centipede.
Oh,
monster.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. Yeah, you fight her or fight that before you go into what was it, Aneer the
Yeah.
last place? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Okay. All right,
I
I'm
actually
back.
beat her
I
before I
remember
beat
now.
Mesmer.
You beat her before Mesmer?
Yeah, because
No.
I was trying to uncover all that area I fucking hated just because I couldn't figure out how to get to the map podium or pillar, whatever.
Uh-huh.
Because it has so many layers of vertical
Yeah.
layers. So I was just
Yeah.
exploring it for hours, and I came across Ramana. Yeah,
Actually, you
Okay.
can fight her before Mesmer, but you don't have to.
yeah, I did.
And
No, I did. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But
and
yeah,
and
you're
you
supposed
can't advance
in
past that anyway because you need Mesmer's flame to
right, right.
break the seal,
Yeah.
you know. But okay. Anyway, back to we kind of got sidetracked here. I don't know if there's any more to talk about Ymir. I really just want to say one more thing about Ymir, and that's that I fucking hate those hand enemies. Um, they are. I'm an arachnophobe. I'm scared of
Oh
spiders,
wow.
and these things are just like
Finger spiders.
the fucking most terrifying things you could possibly say. If I saw one of those in real life, I would immediately just fall into the fetal position.
Yeah, no, they're very creepy looking. I guess lore wise, the only thing about Ymir, or just that quest line in general, is like it feels like America had some sort of involvement. And I can't remember exactly what item description I read that supported that. But it's like what happened, what's going on with the fingers? Because it's like, and why was she using them, and what was her goal
The
in
fingers, what do
using
they
them?
mean?
What do they mean? Like exactly. But it seemed like she had some kind of involvement with them. And if they're related to the outer god, which is related to the magic in the game, and the her man his first woman was Renala, then it's like, oh, was like Marika cool with them at one point and trying to use their powers, or like I don't know. It's all very confusing, but there's some through lines that I'm curious about, and I think Marika was using the fingers for something.
Oh
I know
my
it
god.
sounds.
It's just an elaborate game of rock, paper, scissors, shoot between all of
Yeah.
these alien gods. Yeah.
The last thing I'm just curious about with Amir is just the connection. I can't quite remember what we learn about them, but Jolan, the kind of knight that's hanging out in the church with him.
Hmm.
Like was there what am I forgetting something about that character in terms of why they're so connected to Amir and
Oh, I I don't know if it really explains it fully, but I know that if there's a tower nearby, but on a lower elevation that
yeah.
you can only get to the highest point of the tower if you drop down on it, which I did
Mhm.
accidentally. And there is there is a figure that looks just like Yolan, and it's
Oh.
described as like a puppet that's brought to. That it's not Yolan; it's like Yolan's sister, but
Yeah,
it's
okay.
basically a lifeless like puppet. So I think that's meant to imply that Yolan is like kind of an automaton brought to life by magic, maybe.
Oh,
I don't know,
interesting.
or revived by magic. I don't know.
I remember there being like some puppets in the base game too. I forget what the character's name was. I think they also were tied with the Academy of Raya Lucaria. So that's
Ronnie?
interesting. Huh?
Ronnie had a puppet, no?
Yes, she did.
Yeah, but there was another NPC that like had a lot of puppets. I cannot remember who the hell that
Mm.
was. All right, hold on. Now we're gonna have to Google it because Elden Ring Puppet Master. Let's Google that and see what comes up.
It was probably
And
like a mini boss or something in
it
that
was
in
it
Liarnia.
was yeah, it was actually or someone part of Ronnie's side quest, Celavis.
Yeah,
Preceptor
Yes.
that
Celavis.
creep.
That was the puppet guy.
Yeah.
Um doesn't he like don't you wind up like killing him because he was planning on killing Ronnie, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, I think he was trying to
Those
make
side
her
quests were
into a
so
puppet.
long.
Yeah. I love how half of this episode where we're supposed to be spoiling Shadow of the Erdtree is trying to recall things from base game Elden Ring.
Yeah, because they're like loosely connected, and so we're trying to make sense of it, I think, by
Yeah.
connecting it to the original Elden
It's
Ring.
all, it's also just like, hey, remember this? That was cool.
Yeah.
It's
It's
not
like the
related, but it's
well,
cool.
it is because like well, it is related because the
No, a
fingers
lot
were
of it
like
is. A lot of it is.
super prominent in this game, more so than the original game. So it's like, what is this all about?
Hmm. Yeah. Nah, I'm being somewhat facetious. A lot of it, a lot of what we're bringing up is still related. I mean, yeah, like I said, I wasn't expecting it to get all this additional background behind Marika and how
Yeah.
well that fits in and stuff. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, yeah, plot wise, we covered Mikola's plan, his kind of manipulation, of not only all these people but of the player trying to use or trying to put. We didn't really talk about like he wants to put Radahn's soul in Moog's body. That's why killing them is like so imperative to the plan. And that's how he can resurrect him as the consort. We didn't. I mean, I feel like there's not really much to bring up about that other than to just say it, but um, that's kind of why him getting kidnapped was it was all according to Keikaku. It was all according to plan.
Yeah. I feel
It's
bad
just a
for
much
Moog.
simpler plan than, again, as we mentioned earlier, all these threads. There was that side quest with the dragon that hinted at something Mikola was trying to plan, a
My
council
God.
thing. Obviously, going into that Halig tree, that whole area, what was the purpose behind the Halig tree?
Yeah.
Obviously, fighting Melania. All these threads just kind of got dropped, and it kind of just becomes all right. Age of Compassion. He basically wants to mind control everybody to have them stop fighting and bring peace. Pretty
Toxic
straightforward.
positivity.
Yeah, it's just kind of like a. I mean, it's effective. It's not terrible or the worst thing in the world. Don't get me wrong, but like I know a lot of lore people who are really into lore were kind of upset that so much of that intrigue and things they were speculating on for years since the base game came out were disappointed.
I mean, I think it goes further than that because let's face it, the people that were speculating about this game were doing it long before the game came out when they only had one trailer for this game and
Yeah,
they invented like basically their own plot for it
that's
because
facts.
they couldn't wait to just get the game, which
I-
I found insane and insufferable. But that's probably partly a large amount of the audience that is most upset about this because they spent so much time before the game even came out making up their own shit.
Yeah,
To
you
be fair,
can't.
though, it's based on stuff that was in the base game, and we talked about it, some of
Well,
that
I'm
stuff in
not.
our episode. Yeah.
I'm talking generally about Elden Ring, Jason. I'm not even talking specifically about this DLC.
Okay, I was
Because
just trying to steel man their position. Yeah.
no, that's fine. That's fine. Like let's also just look at the timeline here. The wait between announcement and release for Shadow of the Erdtree was a lot less time than the wait between first trailer for Elden Ring and Elden Ring. So I'm just saying that the carryover from the people that speculated and made up their own shit before Elden Ring came out probably carries over to this DLC, and they're the ones that are compoundedly probably the most disappointed
Yeah.
that their fan fiction didn't come to light.
I mean, I love that this game lends to so much like speculation and things like that, and it will just continue to will continue to speculate even after the everything in Elden Ring is done. But you can't be mad that your theory wasn't conceptualized in the game, or even addressed because they have their own vision, right?
Just why I've never really like Jason, you know this about me especially when it comes to like Final Fantasy 14. I don't understand theory crafting. It's just you're just gonna wind up being disappointed.
Again, to Steelman, and I'm not really like as I've already established, I'm not a lore nerd, but just
Yeah.
having watched a few videos, like this is stuff that even we talked about that is in the game.
Oh yeah.
So it's not so
Well,
much theory crafting as it is like these were mysteries that people felt like were purposefully in there, which is why everybody speculated that the DLC would, and correctly speculated that the DLC would be about Mikola
yeah.
because of all the mysteries that were left in the base game about him.
Yeah. And I will say, yeah, it is kind of disappointing that like the Erdtree, there's not really much context there or further context there. Like we don't really know much more about that. And I did want to bring up a question. So again, going back to base game, you go to the Erdtree to fight Melania and I think this question was discussed in our base game episode, but I might be wrong. But now knowing what we know, do you guys think that Melania did know that about Mikola's plan or that he was abducted at all? Because I feel like that was kind of vague in the base game, and now I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I think that moment where she whispers at Radon, she's saying like, "Oh, Radon, await thy consort," or something along those lines. Oh, Mikola awaits thy consort Radon, or something like that. She mentions it, but we don't know that until this DLC.
Uh-huh.
I think there was like I can't remember exactly what item, but I think that was in a note somewhere or an item description.
Okay.
As I said earlier, my headcanon is she was always straight up being used by her brother.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. Who knows? That could be right. Unless there's supporting evidence against it that we're just not privy to. But you know, the commenters, let us know in the comments if there's more supporting evidence. If we're supposed to read the fucking description for like Mikola's 5-bean soup or something, and that tells you that that Melania was fully privy to his plan, you know, let us know.
Yeah.
I simply don't know the answer because I didn't read all the item descriptions.
I don't even think they explicitly say it, but I think
Probably
they
not.
they did confirm what she whispered to Radon before they went at it.
Yeah. All right. I mean, if nothing else, we can start talking about some gameplay stuff. What I really want to know is what did you guys like and not like about this versus base game Elden Ring?
What I did like was that some of the environments went hard and I mean, I think it's all in all of Elden Ring, but this game, the DLC had some amazing verticality. The original game had an underground, but it didn't have like it's twofold, right? I hate the map because I didn't know what was above and below me, right? Whereas in the original game, you knew you can teleport to the underground. There were two separate maps for each region.
Yeah.
But in this game, they had underground, they had above ground, and there was no map to know where you were. But that made it also kind of cool at the same time because when you discovered, oh shit, I'm above this like dungeon that I explored before, but you're in the shadow realm versus the first area you're in. I forget what it's called.
Gravesite Plain.
Gravesite Plains, right? It's pretty cool to see how the world connects, which is I think has always been a staple of From Software games that was somewhat lost, I think, with the open world format because the linearity of like the Dark Souls games and stuff like that, you would loop around, open a door, and all of a sudden you can see an area that you explored before. And this game kind of like brought that back while still keeping it open world, which I thought was interesting, but it was also frustrating because I always felt like I was missing something. And
Like I
Uh,
said earlier, in the ruins area in the northwest, where the pillar for the map is all the way down at the bottom.
Yeah.
I came in through the Shadow Keep, which brings you up on the upper level, and there's no real way to get down from there. Well, there is, but it's really hard to find. That's how I ended up getting to Rana and fighting her way before I fought Mesmer.
yeah, and there's no way to know whether you're above or below ground from the map, so that kind of made it a little difficult to navigate. But it was still cool to see the world connected like that, and just how much verticality this DLC had. Like you look at the map and you're like, oh, it's not that big. It looks like it's about the size of Lingrave, right? But really, it's
Which I think
triple
is
Lingrave.
I think that's what Miyazaki kind of said
Yeah.
pre-release, was that this would be about the size of Limgrave, which was not true
No, it
at
was way
all.
bigger.
Yeah.
Um, but the environments were absolutely gorgeous. Like Cerulean Desert was probably my one of my favorites because you see like those blue flowers and then the red flowers, and it felt a lot like Ghost of Tsushima in some ways. Obviously, like it still looks very painting like, unlike Ghost of Tsushima, but it just had that like beauty where I would just like sit and just really appreciate just all the colors that were there, and then the white sand beach. It was just absolutely gorgeous. Of course, they put the hands there, which kind of like took away from that, but I kind of like that dichotomy. And then when you're like climbing the summit to go fight Bale, like just the red lightning in the environment and seeing all the like the winds like just going really fast and there's a storm happening
Yeah,
was just
especially
so absolutely cool.
as you like ascend further, it gets like worse and worse, which was really
Exactly.
Yeah.
cool.
I
Yeah.
think outside of Volcano Man are probably my favorite environment in all of Elden Ring. Yeah. The
Yeah,
the mountain, the Dragon Mountains, and the approach to Bale. Yeah.
Mm.
so cool. So I think that to me was like some notable differences. I have a lot more, but I'll let you guys go.
Now, I would honestly just kind of parrot what you just said. Um, any criticisms I would have would more have to do with um, itemization and systems, basically, and more gameplay related stuff. Basically, there's not really much to incentivize you to explore. And I guess we'll get into that.
Ooh, I disagree like completely.
Well, as- considering unless you're somebody who is playing around with a bunch of different builds and is regularly respecking, because most of the gear, like most people tend, like I did, I had my blasphemous blade plus 10, my mimic tier plus 10,
Yeah.
all the armor I liked. I used that until the final boss, and even on the final boss until, we'll talk about it, until I ended up just respecking to.
Yeah.
I still feel bad. I felt like I was cheesing it,
Hey,
but
that's okay, and we'll talk about why that's okay.
Yeah, it's gonna be a big talking piece for sure.
Yes, it is.
outside of looking for the scatter tree fragments, which is kind of the progression system here, there's not really much to find outside of you know optional bosses here and there.
I mean, so I'll say that that's not really a new issue with this DLC.
No, 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 I said that applies to the base game as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like that's just kind of a problem with Elden Ring. Like probably my biggest gripe about Elden Ring is there's so much. There's so many weapons. There's so many
so many
spells,
materials you don't
so many
use.
materials, so many things, and you never know when you're going to go into a dungeon and get a reward that you'll actually use or want to use. Most of the time it's gonna be something that you just get and you're like, cool, I got that, but I'm not gonna
And the
use that.
dungeons here don't even have like cool item like weapons or items at the end. They have like materials. Most of
Mhm.
them. There are still some like jails like that have um what do you call it? Like invader type bosses, but there are only like two or three of them, I think.
But what I'll say about the dungeons in this DLC is to me, they felt more interesting. They felt more unique because
Fair enough.
there were less of them, and I feel as a result they could be focused on designing them to be unique experiences. They didn't all feel so cookie cutter like a lot of the ones in the base game, and all of them having a more kind of unique boss, no repeated boss fights. that's really what I appreciated about this DLC. Even though the rewards, all in all, for a lot of those dungeons still kind of sucked because it's like, unless it happens to fall directly into the niche of your character build, it's kind of useless to you. Um, but at least they were a lot more interesting and fun experiences than I felt a lot of the dungeons in base game were.
Yeah.
Yeah, the base game dungeons felt like it were somewhat randomly generated, whereas this game, and they did have a few that did some interesting things, but
Yeah.
this one, I think they all did something different, which and they all had environments that were different enough to feel like you were exploring a different area. Like the one dungeon that had that like light where you had to turn on the lights to be able to do things and stuff like
Yeah.
that. That was really cool, and
And
yeah, they had the yeah.
And don't get me wrong, like I agree with Delilah that these are some gorgeous environments, and I would have explored them just to see the environments. And as we were talking about the story, we mentioned a lot of environmental storytelling,
Yeah.
things you would only pick up, like the thing with Yolan and finding the puppet in that tower, or seeing these craters where the outer gods crashed and all the finger hands and lizard people are, things like that. And I very much enjoyed exploring. In fact, I made it a point to explore everywhere before I defeated Mesmer and moved on to the final area.
Mm.
But I also try to put myself in the shoes of somebody who's not like that and isn't appreciative of just seeing those things and trying to piece things together outside of the fragments, which are the progression system. What else really is there?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
new armaments and armor, but again, you don't know how you're gonna get them or where you're gonna get them without a guide.
Or if they'll
Yeah.
be even useful to you, yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's also just a tall ask to. I mean, this game introduces a bunch of new weapon types and a bunch of new weapons, and they all require different. They all have different stat requirements. They all have different uh, stat bonuses, and yet the requirement to respec yourself to use any of this stuff is a limited item that you might have like a good amount of still, but every time you want to do it, you have to spend an item, and eventually when those run out, what are you going to do? You can't respec.
Which I
Yeah.
learned the hard way when I decided to respec for the final boss and
Yeah.
had to because I tried at first doing it without upgrading the items, and nah, you gotta upgrade those items.
I'm
So
not even I'm not even
making
talking
having all the
about
mats, yeah.
I'm not even talking about upgrading your weapons. I'm talking about larval tiers. Like
Oh right, in order to
in order to
respec, yeah,
respec, you have to spend a larval tier. What happens if you run out of larval tiers? You're fucked.
yeah.
You
It's
gotta
kind of
hope you can find one that you didn't somehow get, or you have to deal with what you have. And I
it's
think
kind
that's
of the double edged sword of kind of the design philosophy of Elden Ring, the amount of freedom and options it gives you, which is awesome. I like that, but the double-edged sword is going right to what you're talking about. Is you need
yeah.
to
And
design systems to facilitate that, and yeah, larval tiers and materials, all that kind of stuff.
Real
There are limited materials in the game itself, out unless you do New Game Plus to upgrade items
yeah.
to their max potential. Yeah,
Realistically, if you ask me, respecking should cost runes.
or
And
Mm.
nothing.
I mean, yeah, that would be nice, but if it's gonna cost something, it should cost runes.
Yeah.
Like, because that's at least something that no matter how screwed your character is build wise or stat wise, that's still something that you can go and just get in order to respec your character. If
right.
there's
Yeah.
gonna be a cost, it should just cost runes. It should not be this item that you have to go seek out, and then once you find all of them, that's all you get until you start New Game Plus. That is a huge design flaw in my opinion.
And the same with
Yeah.
upgrade materials that get
Yeah,
your items to +10. Yeah,
yeah.
Well, that's
Well, go ahead, Delilah.
no, I was just gonna say that's the thing about the game that I was gonna comment on is like I'm the perfect like audience for this game just because I will find every item and if I miss it I'll look at like a guide to see where to get every item. And that benefited me a lot in this DLC because I upgraded like 15 to 20 different weapons max because I had all of the dragon smithing stones and I did all the bell bearing hunters which allowed me to have all the mats necessary to at least get my weapons to +9 if not or plus 21 or 24 whatever the one before the max level is for each weapon type. So while I'm willing to do all that research and get every weapon, and it highly benefited me from the DLC, I feel really bad for most of the people who play this game who are just kind of like beelining and exploring naturally and not really like going for the extra stuff. And a lot of people had to actually start the game over again with a whole new character to be able to get the bell-bearing hunter so that they could respec for a specific build that they wanted to play with in the main game and fight Radahn and Mohg again. And you wouldn't know that unless you played every other From Software game and you knew that they required you to not beat the game and have a save before that final point to be able to continue with the DLC. And so many new players were getting into From Software Souls games, and they didn't realize that a DLC would require all these things. And then to add insult to injury, and I'm speaking from the perspective of them and not myself, because obviously I had all this stuff available to me because I'm crazy. Not everyone's like that, and there's not enough freedom, to your guys' point, to be able to play around, and they had to do things all over again and farm, and were forced to explore to get those extra items so that they could play around, and that sucks for them.
Yeah. Sucks for them.
No, I mean, the amount of players I saw replaying the game just to get into the DLC after they had already played the game, I was just like, I feel so bad.
Yeah, a lot of my friends were planning on playing this right away. Were telling me they started a new game. I have a lot of podcasts I listen to mentioned that they're starting new games so that they could be prepared to go into this DLC. And I'm like, that sounds exhausting.
It almost happened to me. Remember, because I had to dig out my because for some reason my original Elden Ring save file, when it didn't go into the cloud and transfer to my PS5, I had to dig out my PS4 and hope to God that it was on the PS4's hard drive, which it was, thankfully, for me to transfer it over to the PS5.
Yeah, but all three of us had to know not to have a save from the ending of the game.
Right.
Instead, have the save before you fight the final boss. Not everyone knows that.
I think I was still okay after beating the boss, because I think to enter New Game Plus, you had to do something in Round Table Hold.
Yeah, you had to go to the spirit, the center of it, and activate it, which I think a lot of people did, right?
Yeah, luckily I didn't. I'm pretty sure I still saved. I finished the game, and my save game had completed the final boss and completed the last ending I got, which was Ronnie's ending, otherwise known as the best ending.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure my save was at that state, and I could have entered New Game Plus. Thankfully, I didn't when I was playing the game, because I popped the platinum and was like, cool, I can be fucking done with this game. And I was able to go to Mohg's. It took me a while to figure out where Mohg's palace was. I kind of forgot what it was called. But I was able to,
Magwin Dynasty.
Yeah, I was able to just roll right up to Miquella's, decaying arm and enter the Shadow Realm, without much issue. So, but still, it's the prep work needed for this DLC, and a lot of people deciding, oh, I'm going to start a new game and do all that. And I'm like, oh God, that sounds so exhausting. And some people had to do that out of necessity. And luckily I didn't have to do that.
Because we did it initially.
If I did have to do that, I probably would have been messaging you guys hey, you guys can do Shadow of the Erdtree. I'm out. I'm not doing it.
Yeah, it's kind of in the same way that the design philosophy of giving the player as much freedom as possible in how they approach the game and how they play it is a double-edged sword. Just the general obtuseness of FromSoft's generally and how they make their games is a double-edged sword like that.
But this one I also just find very contradictory. There's lots of freedom and lots of putting the onus on the player to go explore, figure it out yourself. There is lots of that, but it's also very limiting in we've been talking about. You want to try a new weapon type, there's a lot of roadblocks in the way for you to do that.
Yeah.
And it's both a very free game, a very freeing game, and a very limited game. And I feel like there were things they could have done to make it a lot more free in every aspect, and they wouldn't have been very hard to implement, and they probably wouldn't have made the balance like an issue at all.
Yeah, it's
But-
kind of like a subtle way of them padding the game, and From Software don't typically pad their games, although I would say Elden Ring more so than the other games has more padding generally.
Because it's
But
open world, yeah.
it's open world and there's a lot of repeat bosses in the original game, but
Yeah.
it's like kind of like a force padding, like, oh well, you need to go and get all these items because you didn't explore for them in the first place, and it rewards people who did spend that extra time, and it's kind of like forcing you to do more than you wanted to do, perhaps, depending on the type of player you are. And I think that just takes away from the point of the freedom, like you said. But
And it also goes to a complaint a lot of like hardcore FromSoft fans had, just and Mark had for maybe different reasons. Elden Ring being open world in the first place, a lot of this obtuseness and these restrictions aren't as bad, obvious or bad feeling when the game is much not necessarily well, yeah, smaller, tighter. It's more interconnected. Um, as opposed to
yeah,
being a giant open world, yeah, where the content is very spread out if you
yeah,
don't know
because
what you're doing.
even if you go to the finger place, there was one item in that entire area. One item. I looked at every single area. I explored every finger, and there's like, oh, there's two items, but whoa. And like you're exploring a big space, and you're only finding like one or two things, and it's just like it kind of sucks when you spend all that time exploring. It's almost like they want you to have a guide for this. To be
Yeah.
able to play it, so side by side. And I hate playing games like that with a guide. And not that I'm against it, but I just rather just be me and my TV and my controller, and that's it.
Yeah,
I don't mind cleaning up with a guide if I miss something, but it just sucks. Like if you miss something, you can't do anything about
and I
it.
guess that's what I was getting at earlier with the incentive for exploration. Like it's so much easier when not easier. It's so much more streamlined when it's Dark Souls and you're just moving through like castles, and as you're going, oh, you see the glowing thing over here in the corner of this dungeon room, as opposed to fucking mountains and plateaus, and in a random tree line on one of the plateaus is like the best sword in the game or some shit. Like I'm just making a
Yeah, no, I
hyperbolic
got you.
thing up, but yeah.
The one thing about this DLC that I did like in terms of gameplay philosophy is having the Shadow Tree fragments that were only usable in the Shadow Realm, because it helped, I think, with progression. So whether you were level like 90 or level 150, the game still scaled the same. Like it if you were level 150, you didn't really have that much of an advantage over someone who was level 90, because the Shadow Tree fragments were the way of progressing, and I thought that was really cool. And
I
uh-huh.
Go ahead, Delilah.
I was gonna say, and the revered spirit ashes were another item which I didn't really make use of because I only used my mimic tier for the final boss. But I feel like it was From Software's way of saying, like, you motherfuckers, use your goddamn spirit summons. They're part of the game. They're really cool. Here's an entire item for you to be able to beef them up so that you can fight these bosses and have a good time. And I thought that was kind of funny and a little bit of a slap in the face to the purists. But ultimately, I think the Shadow Tree fragments were cooler.
It's a game mechanic. Use it. That's what I have to say about your purist comment.
Yeah.
It's are you really being a purist if you're not using a game mechanic? I don't know.
Right.
I think the Shadow Tree fragments were a really cool way, because it that does like help to aid in the issue of exploration feeling rewarding, right? It's always going to be something that you can use to make yourself stronger, no matter your build. It's a matter of whether or not you choose to use it, which is fine. That's on the player to make that choice. But the fact of the matter is, it's not like finding a sword and you're not using a sword build, right? So it's useless to you. It's always something that will make you stronger, no matter what you're doing, no matter how you're playing the game. What?
I mean, it does technically always make you stronger, but this is something that I wish they made more explicit, is that they scale the same way your stats do, where it's diminishing returns. So once you hit, I think it's level 12 or 13 with the fragments, the gains for each additional level is only like 1 or 2%.
I mean, that's fine.
But but and this also goes into another counterpoint. I didn't necessarily have a problem. I agree that the fragments at least give you some reason concretely with gameplay to explore, but it creates a problem for people who don't necessarily want to have to explore this giant open world and just want to go through, fight the bosses, because they are kind of necessary. Not unless like you'll have a pretty bad time if you don't with some of these a lot of these bosses. Um, and so it creates an imperative for people who don't necessarily want to have to run around the entire map. They just want to go find the bosses, play it like they would in a traditional Souls game, if you understand what I'm saying. And so if they're not finding enough fragments naturally as they're going through that path, then the gameplay experience kind of feels bad for them because they're at a disadvantage for not exploring. I feel like there should have been more given just for defeating bosses and going along kind of the main story path, if you will, less of them just placed randomly around the world.
I see your point. I don't necessarily disagree. You do, even though it's not as helpful, you do still get a hefty amount of runes from defeating bosses. You still like I don't know about you guys. I leveled up like 50 times just playing through this DLC. Like traditional leveling up.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I leveled up quite a bit. I think
And
I
that
started
was
at like level one. What was it? 130, 140, maybe even 150, and was like level 170 something or 180 by the
I,
end. I don't know.
I was like 170. I started at like 170 and ended probably around 215, 220 ish. Like I leveled up a lot during this DLC, and
Yeah.
that still had its benefits. Like it wasn't like
Sure,
it's not like I didn't notice the increase, but obviously, yeah, the Shadow Tree fragments helped a lot.
yeah. I mean
Um,
the earlier point I made about the Shadow Tree fragments is that they only really help for like the first 10, 11, 12 levels. Like you'll notice the effects of it much more earlier in the leveling of the fragments than later
mhm.
on, where each level is only like a 1 or 2% stat boost. Like you can see a chart of it. It's the same way there are soft caps and hard caps with your stats and how
Yeah,
much they boost you in the game generally.
right. Like it's not worth. Wasn't. Isn't it usually like level or like when
60,
once you reach
yeah.
I thought it was 50. Like usually there's
Maybe it
There's
was
significant.
two,
50
there's
or
two
60.
soft cap. There's a soft
Yeah.
cap and a hard cap. I think soft cap is like 50 and hard cap is like 60 or something like
Yeah.
that.
Okay, so like yeah, like I get it, and I'm not surprised that they implemented that with the Shadow Tree fragments. But point being is this Elden Ring is a game so contingent on exploring. Like it's a massive world. To only beeline like what you need to is kind of doing a disservice to the game in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And in the base game, it wasn't as rewarding to explore because of the fact that you could always get something that you're not going to use. And here, exploring can actually lead to something that's always going to help you.
And look, I want to be
Um,
clear that I enjoyed exploring for exploring's sake, so I didn't
yeah,
necessarily have this problem. But I do know that there are a lot of FromSoft fans who prefer to play it like a Dark Souls game where they're going through the line
You
and
just
fighting
play
bosses.
Dark Souls. Like I hate to
But
say it.
but well, but they don't want to just run around, fields and places. They want to actually engage in the combat, which honestly isn't even just FromSoft fans. A lot of people just generally are like that. That don't necessarily just want to run around these fields. They want to fight bosses. That's what they're there for.
I just don't think it's fair. And I know you're not speaking for you, but I don't think it's fair to criticize the game for being something it's not. Like it's very
bingo.
clearly trying to be very different from Dark Souls, and I can appreciate it because if I want that like experience of having just boss after boss, let me tell you a game called Black Myth Wukong. Um, there's other games that have like those like gameplay sensibilities, and those games are clearly that's the purpose. Go back to playing Dark Souls or Bloodborne. I feel like this game, like part of it was very much intended to be exploration, and while I think there are pros and cons to that generally, and I can see that not being appealing to everyone, I don't think it's fair to want Elden Ring to be like Dark Souls in that way.
And again, for people listening, just to emphasize, I am trying to voice complaints I've heard from other people. These are
Yeah,
not
no,
my
yeah,
complaints.
that's
Yes.
very clear for sure.
Yeah, we get it. You're you know claiming these complaints are other people's, but you really just want to complain about the game yourself, Jason. We understand.
Yeah.
All right.
I think actually I heard more people complaining that the game's kind of forcing you to use summons and I think I don't know if this
Yes,
will lead us into like boss design.
Well,
Yeah,
let's
that's
do
probably the
it.
biggest
Yeah.
conversation surrounding this DLC, both
The
from
general
casual
difficulty.
and just from casual and hardcore FromSoft players, is the design of the fights. Yeah,
Which, yeah, let's talk about that. Man, a lot of these bosses are designed like ass, if you ask me.
It
I don't know how anyone's supposed to beat Radon by themselves. I don't fucking get it.
Okay.
Bale too. Go ahead.
People have, and they spent 8 to 24 or more
Yeah.
hours doing it.
you need to know.
No
You need to
thanks.
literally learn the fights in terms of where the safe spaces are, the frames of each attack and combo pattern that can possibly come up. And within the case of Radon, there's a healthy amount of RNG because of the AoEs that can potentially come out. Although some of
Yeah.
the AoEs you can learn the pattern and know where and when to dodge, so it will never hit you. When you boil all that final fight down, it's really just stick to his legs and roll to the left, I think it is, around him,
Mhm.
and you'll
Mhm.
never get hit by any of the AoEs or slices. But there's still like things like the cross slash that I think to this point is still, as far as we know, undodgeable. But it doesn't come up
Hmm.
that often. You know what I'm talking about, Delilah, where it comes down with the two swords at once?
Is that in his second phase?
No, it's in both.
It's in both. I think
It,
I
it
was able
doesn't
to dodge
appear.
that.
It doesn't appear. You basically, it's kind of like waterfowl, where you have to get a certain distance away, and in order to not be definitely hit by it.
Oh. Well, the thing is, I mean, I was a shield strength faith
That's
build,
that's that's
so
what I ended up doing was the shield and spear. Yeah,
and that was my build from fighting Radagon. So I didn't change it
Oh,
for any
okay.
specific reason. I fell in love with the fingerprint shield, and I like I like the guard counter in this game. I think it's fantastic. So I always was drawn to the shield for that reason. So I think I had the so-called requested meta build for Radon without even knowing I had it, because if you look at my
yeah.
full playthrough, I played the entire game with that shield.
You probably blocked the cross slash attack a couple of times. It
I
doesn't.
think that may
It's
have
not
been it.
like a
Yeah.
natural part of the combo. It comes by itself sometimes, I believe, if I remember correctly. But yeah,
But it does
depend.
stagger you if you don't have high poise.
Yes, but to Mark's original point, yes, with the Radon fight, like you have to actually learn frame by frame and know the safe spots, but it is doable. The point is how
Look,
much
I'm sure it's doable, but
the general
it.
point is the amount of artificial difficulty, and not just in the Radon fight. Other fights have it as well.
I mean, I thought Mesmer was a fucking nightmare, and I don't know how anyone can beat that by
I
themselves.
actually thought Mesmer was one of the better design, like outside of Bale, probably my favorite boss of the DLC.
Yeah, and
Because
I've heard that too.
the tells were much easier.
Hmm.
He had more openings.
Yes, you had more openings, and even another problem that a lot of people and myself had with this game was the camera with a lot of these fights and how much it swings around.
Yeah.
Even with the second phase of Mesmer and the snake coming in, the camera wasn't that bad, even though you were inside, and there were easy tells, so it was very easy to dodge. Mesmer, I actually enjoyed a lot. I thought, again, like I said, second best only to Bale.
Maybe if I had more patience and time, I guess, to spend with each of these bosses, I would have given them the time necessary to like learn them a little more. But like, if I die 3 times, I'm summoning people, and
Yeah.
I died 3 times, so I started summoning people, like actual other players,
I mean, but look,
at a
like there
lot
are
of these
certain builds
fights.
that are just fucked. Like when I say the secret to Radon is sticking to his legs and rotating around to the left
Hmm.
to keep him turning, so his AoEs, like that's for a melee build. If
Yeah.
you're trying to run like a fucking magic Azure Comet build, you're fucked in that fight. Unless you have a summon to take aggro away.
And I imagine that Radon is like one of those fights where you and I both respect, and we're probably not alone. I imagine that fight alone caused a lot of people to respec.
Oh yeah,
And most likely to the same or
the
similar thing that
shield and
you and
spear.
I.
Yeah.
Well, I used it was a thrusting sword. It was one that had like high bleed.
Yes.
So that's what it wasn't a spear. It was a thrusting sword.
But it's the
I forget
same
what the hell it
general
was
thing you're
called.
built. It's the same
Yeah,
general thing
right.
you're building up. Like I used Magwin's spear,
Okay.
which I guess is actually kind of thematically makes sense because,
Definitely.
yeah, because taking it's Mohg's weapon you get from defeating
Yeah,
Mohg.
yeah.
So you're getting vengeance. You're avenging Mohg.
That's
Yeah,
kind of cool, actually.
it is so cool. And the thing with Radon, I thought like aesthetically and music wise, the boss was really cool. I loved the cutscene for him. I thought it was super badass. Them like zooming into his like big ass arms and shit. It was so cool. But the fight itself, combat wise, was just boring, and it wasn't difficult in a good way, like
Yeah,
Melania or
Yeah, it's
even
artificial
Mesmer
difficulty.
was.
Yeah.
It's just like he has like a 20 hit combo. You just gotta wait for him to get through it to then get like one or two shots in. That's just corny. And then he has all these AoE attacks, and a lot of the bosses, frankly, had all these AoE attacks where um it felt like From Software was trying to change the way you fight these bosses, and using the dodge mechanic was kind of useless in this entire DLC, which sucks for someone that is used to playing like that, especially if they're using like a dex build. It forces you to jump or use your shield because of all the AoE attacks that these bosses had. And I just don't think that's fair if you're offering different types of builds. And while I use like the mimic tier my entire first playthrough because I don't give a fuck, and I think spirit summons are cool. They remind me of spirit animals in any RPG. I did try and test myself to not use them in this DLC just to, I guess, make a point that just because you use them doesn't mean you're good or bad at the game. It's just a thing that you
yeah.
have a choice to use. And I found that I beat the bosses in less than half an hour most of the time, except for the final boss. And I said to myself, if I fight a boss more than an hour and a half to 2 hours, like I'm pulling that thing out. And he was really the only boss that I had to. And that's just like cheap as fuck, you know? Like I don't mind using it. And I got in my first try when I pulled out the mimic tier at that point, but I just think that if the fight requires you to do something that you don't really want to do or requires you to make a build that you don't really want to use, it's kind of whack.
Yeah, jumping.
Yeah.
You're right that part of the difficulty here was FromSoft kind of playing against what people are expecting from a Souls game. So, like you mentioned, rolling the AOE's that require jumping. There's also a lot of attacks, like slashing attacks, including in Radon, where jumping is actually preferable to rolling because you can elevate yourself right above the blade and can come down with a jumping attack. Um, there's also roll catches, so a lot of attacks from bosses that are designed to punish panic rolling.
Mm-hmm.
So like you'll have attacks where it'll be a 1-2, so they're expecting you to roll, and then the attack is designed to hit you and almost punish you for rolling and learn that you need to do something. You need to jump over. Like with Rolana, there are a lot of those range swipes that are vertical.
Yeah.
And if you roll, you're going to get hit by the second follow up. So you're supposed to be jumping over them.
Right.
Or roll
I feel
through
like
them at least.
Yeah, I feel
Which
like I didn't really have many rolling issues. The only times I had rolling issues were what you kind of just
well
described, where you
for
roll
us,
through one attack and the second attack comes really quickly to the point where
yeah.
you can't avoid it.
But also if you're like us and you're using the mimic tier or some other spirit summon,
Oh, I
it's
was
taking
using a
away.
mimic tier at all times.
Yes, no, so was I. A lot of the times the main use or the main benefit to that is drawing aggro, so you don't even have to deal with a lot of these attacks half the time. Especially if like my build was blasphemous blade, which the whole point is you're not even attacking physically. You're using the special ability over and over again to shoot uh, beams of lava that also lifesteal and do massive amounts of faith-based damage from a distance. So you're not even getting within melee range a lot of the time. So I didn't have too much trouble until Radon, but I did notice the design. A lot of people would call it cheap difficulty or artificial difficulty that Delilah's talking about. where it's almost
Yeah.
like all the problems that people had with Melania in the base game, too fast, undodgeable attacks, which very hardcore people have made very long videos talking about how people are just whining too much. They're not taking the time to learn the fights. Most people, like Delilah said, don't want to take 2 to 3 hours to fucking just learn one boss fight.
Yeah, I got a job, bro.
Yeah, like
I just had to get this DLC done.
and
I don't have time for that.
and even then it can take an hour or two if you know what you're actually supposed to be looking for. Like I was talking about, like things like knowing the frames, knowing the safe spots, knowing every combo possible combination, and the tells for each individual one. Like the average player is not going to know all that shit. So it
Yeah.
almost feels like it almost feels like they took a lot of the shit that people hated about Millennia and applied it across the board to lesser and greater extent, with depending going boss by boss. Like I said, there are bosses that I loved in this DLC, like Bale and Mesmer, but a lot of them just felt more chorish. Or you had weird bosses like the Divine Beast and the Hippo that have weird or the Commander Gaius and his fucking unblockable charge, yeah, or undodgeable charge, because the hitbox is so weird. And with a lot of those more animal looking bosses, the tells
Yeah.
you can't really tell because you don't know if the boss is just moving or if it's a tell for an attack.
Right.
So it can get frustrating very easily, yeah.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, like, it's either you have time to learn the boss moves or you use the tools in the game, and that's a choice. And I just think either choice is fine. I just don't like when a boss is so incredibly cheesy that it's forcing you to do a certain thing or spend a certain amount of hours on.
Yeah, I mean we've talked about that. I think we talked about it in our base Elden Ring episode, but we talked about that in another episode of the show. I can't remember which game though.
The thing is that the base game really only had. I can only really remember Melania having that problem.
See, I felt the Elden Beast had that problem a little bit.
Well, a lot of that I think came down to, and there's a reason why they added the ability to ride the horse or whatever it's called.
Yeah, Torrent.
Torrent, yeah, because that boss was very clearly designed with Torrent in mind, and for some reason you couldn't ride it on release.
They added him eventually. That's so funny.
Yeah, you can ride
Did
Torrent
they?
in that fight
Really?
right now. Yeah.
Cool.
Oh wow!
I'm
Okay.
pretty damn sure. I might, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty damn sure I've seen videos of people doing that, unless it's like a mod or something. But
I see.
But this kind of gets to just a point where, with all of the options and places they've gone to with boss design, like, have they kind of exhausted everything they can do with the boss in this kind of Dark Souls / Elden Ring format? Obviously with something like Sekiro, it's a much different, because they actually limited kind of the gameplay options, but in doing so added a lot of depth. And here
Yeah.
it's interesting because the amount of freedom you have kind of led them down design paths for some of these bosses that, what more can they do to make it harder? You know what I mean? It starts getting to a point where it just feels, and a lot of people have voiced this, unfair.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they could just take a break and not release so many of
Do Armored Core,
games.
yeah.
Do Armored Core. Oh my god, I love that game.
They should make a platformer that just has a bunch of references to all the From Software games. They should do that. Make it all like nostalgic and stuff. Have it star a little robot or something.
Or fighting game.
I'm just spitballing, putting out some ideas.
Yeah.
A fighting game, yeah. Fucking have I don't know, Gwendolyn versus Patches or something. Have Patches just kick everyone down a hole. What an exciting fighting game. Anyway,
Smash Souls.
Yeah, overall for the bosses, Radon was the only one I really got stuck on. I know other people got stuck. Like Mark, you mentioned you didn't like Mesmer. I loved Mesmer.
Well, I didn't really get stuck on, but then again, I had this policy where if I die like 3 times, I'm summoning people, like actual people.
Yeah.
and I will do that until the boss is defeated. I just did not want to. I did not want to spend hours of my time on each boss, and I even wound up doing that on like bosses that I couldn't summon on, like some of the mausoleum fight. There was one mausoleum fight in particular, against the guy with the big like
The
Uchigatana.
crossbow. The first
No,
one. Oh,
no. The guy with the big katana, like the large Uchigatana. I can't
Oh.
remember his name, but he was a massive pain in the ass because he was one of those bosses where he would attack and I would roll through it, but the follow up attack would be so fast that I couldn't dodge again,
yeah.
and it would
It's a
hit
roll.
me.
That's what I was talking about when I talked about roll catches. There's a lot of that in this game
Yeah, no,
because they
I
know.
know, and I did experience that. I just didn't have. I still felt that dodging was still viable. I didn't have as many problems with it, but there were some bosses where it was an issue, and that was one of them. Where
And
I
Radon
basically just.
Radon has that as well, where there's the double swing.
Mhm.
So you have to know. That's what I was talking about. You have to learn the timing of when you do the second dodge after that first swing. You almost have to
No,
do
I
it
don't.
before he swings.
No, I don't. I just have to respec so I can hold a giant shield and have way higher poise than he can destroy
Yeah, I mean,
and
for
stab
me,
him.
I know some people got stuck on like Rolana very early on, and some of
Mm,
that had to do, I think, with frag. Some of that had to do with the design of the bosses. I didn't really get stuck until Radon, and even then,
yeah.
the first phase it was not a problem. I learned all those moves. It's the second phase where the design just goes like millennia exponential times 1,000, and in addition to knowing all those moves, there's a massive hitbox for an insta kill, hug, kiss
Oh god, that was
attack.
so stupid.
There's AoEs getting poured on. Like it
I
just and just the visuals. There's so much visual clutter.
Well,
Even Bale, which I love that fight, you could argue that there's too much visual clutter and
yeah.
the camera gets weird during certain phases where he's flying around.
Yeah, well, when you have a giant boss like that, like, and you have to get right up on it, especially when the lock on is just on a very specific point of him. So anytime you attack, it's going right to that lock on, which in Bale is like, I think his head, which is
Yeah.
kind of tricky to attack because he's constantly attacking with his head.
Well,
So
with that,
it's tricky.
they were trying to, I think, tell players because a lot of players tend to go for dragons underneath them to try to because they think it will make them safe, which is why
Hmm.
Bale has so many AoE attacks directly underneath him. To when you go underneath Bale, he'll instantly do the electric attack that you can't dodge right underneath him to get you out and put you back
Hmm.
in front of him. Yeah,
well, I liked Renala a lot because I felt like her moveset was kind of easy to telegraph and figure out. Like it wasn't like she did all these like she didn't have like a 30 hit combo and then you
Yeah.
had like an opportunity to do 2 hits. Like I
Yeah.
felt like you could do more. Same with Mesmer ultimately. Those two were my favorite fights. I also really like fighting the putrescent knight in the fissure. That was a really cool actually environmental sequence as well, like going deep. Like Bale, you went up the summit. Here you went like deep down underground, and that was sick with
and
like
you
all the
basically
purple
had to take a
flowers.
leap of faith. There was nothing really to indicate other than player messages
Yeah.
that you needed to jump from that point, and you did. Like I was afraid I was going to die. I have a
Oh,
souls,
Yeah.
okay. I think I know what boss you guys are talking about now.
He
and
looked like
then
kind of like Orphan of Kaz a little bit.
yeah, and it has a horse that has like the double follow up attack.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah. And going back to what I was saying, like that dungeon was really fucking cool, and the
I
fact
loved
yeah.
that
it.
what you just said, Jason, not knowing that, or not necessarily knowing that you got to take that leap of faith and doing it and it leading to the arena. There was another fight that did something like that, another dungeon that did something like that
There
that led
was
to the boss.
yeah, there was a one of the maybe one of the jails or something like that that had that.
I I think so, yeah. And
Yeah.
that was really cool. That was really cool, and the base game didn't really have any of that. It was a lot of cookie cutter dungeons. This had a lot more unique, interesting dungeons to me, and I really dug it.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate to people listening, I'm trying to voice complaints that I've heard from other people because, like I said, I didn't really have a problem getting through these bosses until the final one. Radon was kind of where I broke and ultimately had to respec. Um, but these are things that I've noticed with a lot of other people complaining and why people have been complaining about the difficulty. And I guess I'm just voicing those complaints to point out where I think their design is getting a little beyond what what the formula that they are using was designed for.
Yeah.
With a lot of these, and for more hardcore people who spend all that time learning these fights, obviously it won't be as big of an issue. But for like, especially with Elden Ring being kind of the mainstream breakout hit that really brought in a lot of casuals to FromSoft games, it can be kind of a issue for a lot of them. Yeah.
I thought the Midra
Yeah.
fight was cool too. Not the fight itself, but like the cutscene was super badass. And like
The
that
which one?
area, the Midra, Lord of Frenzy Flame.
Oh,
Oh
okay.
God. So I didn't say this earlier. That was the one place I did not go to, because I didn't want to go through the whole process of getting to the Dark Forest. So I didn't actually do Midra, but I watched the cutscenes and I know the lead up to it and the fight. Yeah.
And that area was really cool because it was like it had the illusion of being open, but it was like somewhat linear, and you had to like the intention was for you to basically like stealth through it,
Yeah.
which was really really fucking cool. Like nothing there was nothing like that in base Elden Ring, where
Yeah.
the enemies were like that, and there was a way to kill them. I found out,
Yeah.
because I was following a guide to find everything, because I again just don't have the patience to explore everything myself and and hope that I find everything. Like there's a very very narrow parry window that you can have for them.
Hmm.
But the idea of like having to stealth around these enemies and like it being this very dire situation, that was really cool, and that was like a thing that you could that was an optional thing that led to another really cool dungeon with a really cool boss fight.
Yeah.
Um,
And the area was like
just
the horror game portion of it, which was
yeah,
creepy.
it was really really cool, really really cool.
One more thing about the bosses that I think is a genuine criticism that a lot of people have had, and I do think the bosses, regardless of how many fragments you have, you could be up at the hard cap with the fragment upgrades. Um, the bosses just do too much damage, so there's not as much room for
Yeah,
error, which contributes. For example, Radon could kill me even with almost fully upgraded fragments. You know, like a build that had got me through the entirety of the game relatively easily. Radon could, and he's so fast. Radon could take me out in 2 hits if I made one
yeah.
mistake. And
I was wearing
this applied. I think this also contributes to why so many people are complaining about difficulty. There's just not enough time to learn. Like Bale can take you out in one hit with his breath if you don't get out of the hitbox enough. And that can be super frustrating, especially in a case like Radon where it's 2 phases and it can take you a while to get through one, and then you make one mistake in the second phase and you got to do the whole thing all over again.
yeah. I was using for Radon because I respec everything, so I could wear like Moore's armor, which is like one of the heaviest armors you can wear,
Mm.
one of the most protective, and I used his shield. And yeah, even with that, Radon could kill me in like 2-3 hits.
Yeah.
Before that, the armor that I used for most of the remainder of the base game and for the majority of this DLC, I use Tree Sentinel armor, which is pretty protective. It's one of the more protective armors from the base game, and was still one of the more protective ones that I found throughout all of Shadow of the Erdtree. Most bosses could kill me in like 2 to 3 hits.
Yeah, when it comes to bosses, the level of protection from armor in this DLC is almost irrelevant.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
almost more beneficial to take it off to save stamina.
it's ridiculous. It that's really that's a really good point. A really good
And
thing to bring up.
and to go
They
back
do way too much damage.
and to go back to people who will argue what I was saying earlier, that you're supposed to learn the fights, you're supposed to learn the frames and the patterns and the safe spots and which way to go. Well, it's really fucking frustrating to do that when if you make one mistake on a run, you're insta dead, which
Yeah, I mean,
contributes to
you
people
already
not
said it.
wanting to learn it. Yeah.
Yeah, you already said it. It's like you can't learn a fight if you die in a single hit or 2 hits. There's no trial and error there. There's only error.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
You're not given an opportunity to learn if you just instantly die. Like,
Which
and a lot
I
of the
think is something
bosses.
a lot of the hardcore people that are complaining about the people complaining about the difficulty aren't
Mhm.
really grasping that because
Yeah,
they are willing to just die and die and die over and over again.
Well, I also
right.
think
For hours on end. Yeah,
there's like you can't really complain about the difficulty if you're not using the game's tools. That's also like a perspective that I have.
Yep.
well,
I
even with
completely agree.
a mimic tier drawing aggro, because as soon as you attack, you immediately draw the boss's aggro back. So with Radon, if I attack, I'll draw his aggro, and if I make one mistake, I still get killed in
No,
two
yeah.
strikes anyway. So
Exactly, but I just mean for people who are refusing to use certain things like summons or whatever. It's like you can't complain about difficulty. You can complain about the boss design being stupid and cheesy, but you can't. I don't think that's a difficulty conversation as much as it is
Now,
like
they'll complain about the people that are having trouble learning the boss, but then they'll also complain about those people trying to make it easier for themselves. That's the problem. Is
yeah, exactly.
they want these people that to play exactly like they do, but the way that they play is so limiting and requires so much free time that it's like you don't really have a leg to stand on. If you want, I mean, this is turning into a conversation of just complaining about the
meta,
FromSoft
yeah.
community, which there's a lot to complain about there, if you ask me. Um, but these are all really important and good points. It's
Well,
like,
Yeah, and there are other things like obscure design. Like for instance, in the Radon fight, there's that one attack, the ranged attack he does, where he floats up and shoots a bunch of comets at you. And there's
yeah,
no real indication for your average player that you're supposed to sprint away and then jump. You're not supposed to roll. You're supposed to sprint and then jump
yeah.
when they come close enough. There's no way I would have
yeah.
figured that out without having seen it done.
I mean, I survived that by rolling, but I also died to it like 6 times because I didn't realize that you had to go to the edge of the arena. I was
Yeah.
trying to figure out where he was in the
Oh no
sky
no
and just make
no
sure I
no
was
no no
far
no!
away from there.
I'm talking about the one where he shoots a couple of purple orbs at you.
Oh, that. Yeah, that I just blocked through that with
Yeah,
the
because
big shield.
if you roll, you'll get hit by a follow up orb. But you need if you sprint and jump away from it, you'll dodge them all through the jump.
Oh
And
God,
Oh,
yeah,
I
there's
I
didn't
like,
didn't
know
know that.
that. Oh.
how do you figure that out? That's not really very
By
intuitive.
dying 60 times until you just randomly
But
try that and
I
realize,
would
oh,
have
that
never
works.
even thought of that if I hadn't seen someone else do it.
Yeah, well, you just Jason, you just have to have like 20 hours to just repeatedly die against that boss. Like, you don't have 20 hours to just do that to figure this out yourself? Come on, man. What are you
Yeah.
doing?
And like I don't want to shit on the From Software community as a whole because when I first started playing Dark Souls games and stuff like that, there was a character called Solaire Diasera, and he was the person that gave you the white soapstone summon sign. And that white soapstone summon sign helped you bring in players to help you for some jolly cooperation, and people were always just super helpful for you for you to be able to learn the fight or get through a certain region, or you can go into their world and help them and figure out the region before you face it yourself. And I just think that's just always been part of those games, and all of a sudden I don't know where it came from, but people forget that that was like Solaire is the most iconic character in all of these games,
Right.
and they're forgetting the purpose of his character, and it's just sad.
I know
Yeah.
I don't want to I didn't want to sound like I was shitting on anybody. My only point was that, or my only purpose was that I had been watching a lot of this discourse via like YouTube videos from big content creators and forums, and seeing a lot of this back and forth. And I was just trying to give perspective from the average side.
Average.
And also, also just to like, I'm throwing out all these points, but I guess my bigger criticism of the DLC and the fight design, minus a few bosses like Mesmer, is that FromSoft seems to have run out of ideas and are pushing boundaries that the framework of the Souls games, and by extension Elden Ring, can't really aren't designed to handle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
You might be right about that.
Which is why I mentioned Sekiro earlier, where they actually limited your options, but in doing so, were able to do so much more with boss design and fight designs, and add arguably more depth than something like Elden Ring.
I mean,
Yeah.
go ahead, Delilah.
I would just say I agree. Also that game is super difficult because of that. Like you can't overlevel yourself in that game to fight bosses. But I kind of love it.
You also get a self revive in that game,
That's true.
which for learning fights is
Is
great.
great. Exactly.
And the healing animation is much faster, which is
Yes.
also great. You don't
And you
get
can
clubbed
pause.
for trying to heal yourself.
Man, you guys are making me want to play Sekiro.
Oh my god, you would love it. It's fantastic.
Here's the thing: is like all of From Software's games now kind of feel super limited in comparison to Elden Ring because there's just so much in this game. There's so many options, so many bosses, and so many like things that they've shoved into this that like everything pales in comparison, size wise, options wise, etc. But like, there's something to that, right? Like,
yes, it says a lot that people are complaining a lot more about Elden Ring and fight designs versus those games. I feel like.
Well, I mean, really, just where I'm at is I actually really want to replay Dark Souls now.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really wanted to replay Dark Souls in a long time, but after playing through this DLC, I actually kind of want to replay Dark Souls because I played through Demon Souls, I played through original Demon Souls, and I played through the remake, a few years ago. But it's been a long time since I revisited Dark Souls, and Dark Souls is like that From Software game that really kind of cemented them in the conversation and set the course for everything to come after.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's been a very long time since I played that game. And with how vast Elden Ring is, and even this DLC, I want to kind of go back to something simpler now and just feel that again, just feel the impact of having armor on that works and protects me, and bosses that might not be able to kill me in 2 hits.
Which is precisely where Mark, you hit it right on the head. That's precisely where I was trying to lead the conversation with everything I was just saying is it time for From Software to
push the reset button?
Not even push the reset button. They've pushed the boundaries of how much they can do in one game, and it starts to break some of the, not rules, but like, it does start to break some of the rules that people have associated with the games. And I bring up the Sekiro comparison because Sekiro is much more limited, but allows for so much more design wise. So less is more. And what does that mean for the future, where they should go with their games in this? They're games that are in this formula, so to speak.
Right. And then from what I understand about Sekiro, like it is different enough that it's kind of questionable. Like people always refer to this genre, this kind of blanket genre that fans have kind of created for games like this as like it's the Soulsborne genre, but that it's questionable whether or not Sekiro is kind of included in that because of how different Sekiro is. And I guess as part of that, how limiting Sekiro is,
and Bloodborne for that matter.
Well, that's the born part of Soulsborne, but yeah, you're also right. It's that there are more limited options in Bloodborne. There's not nearly as many weapon types from what I know. I have not played Bloodborne. I've played very little of Bloodborne.
There's no like real build. Like you have a choice of like certain weapon types, but that's it.
But all of them are viable, and there's not really like as much freedom as there is even in Dark Souls.
Mm-hmm.
Which is probably also contributing to why Bloodborne is so fervently beloved. And why it's kind of like one of those like gateway games into this genre for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's pretty, what I understand, pretty beginner friendly. And I think Elden Ring has kind of ascended past that. If you want to play Shadow of the Erdtree, it's not so beginner friendly anymore. It's very much you have to be willing to just hammer away at these things or play the game as it's kind of intended. And even then struggle, because I did. I had If playing the game as intended would have gotten me through Verdun, I wouldn't have had to respec my character to become a tank.
Yeah.
So
I think this is kind of related to your final question, right? What we're talking about here.
Yeah, that's where I was trying to lead it. Yeah.
Well, I guess before we get to that, is there anything else we want to talk about?
No, I mean,
No.
it
Else to
sounds
bring
like,
up we haven't already
especially
discussed.
to those listening, I just want to reiterate that I really, really enjoyed this DLC, and the criticisms I'm making, I make out of love because, like, I played this DLC for like a week straight every day, multiple hours a day. I don't really game like that anymore, but the fact that it was able to draw me in like that, and I was just
Yeah.
on it, and I even finished it before Mark, weeks before Mark, should tell you a lot about the quality.
To be fair, life is just busy. All right.
Yeah, no, I know life is busy, but it should tell you a lot about the quality and how much I enjoyed it. And the critiques I'm making more out of love and where I think the future for these games are. I think Elden Ring has pushed up against a boundary. It's time to go back.
Yeah.
Well, I guess on that note, into the final question. What do you guys think is next for From Software, or what do you want to be next from Software? A new IP, a sequel to Elden Ring? I know I put in here as a joke because everyone's begging for a new Bloodborne or a Bloodborne remaster. We did not get that with the PS5 Pro reveal earlier today, on the day that this is recorded. So a lot of people are really sour over that $700 price tag and no Bloodborne remaster. But what do you guys want to see next from FromSoft, other than the general like scale back comment?
Can I just want to make a quick comment not related to your question, then I'll answer your question.
Okay, go ahead.
I just want to say I hated the incinerator golems. I fought every single one of them. There's 1 to 2 per region.
Oh,
They were really, really cool boss designs visually. They look kind of like the rumbling in Attack on Titan. If you know what it is, you know what it is. And I love the way they look. They were such a disappointment to fight. It was just you just were there for like 30 minutes fighting away at their
slice at the
feet.
heels. Yeah.
Yeah, it was terrible, and they had so many of them. It was very poor combat design.
The ones where you had to go up high and throw things into the furnace, like
The fire
those were
bombs, yeah,
cool.
the heavy pots,
And
yeah.
yeah, and frankly, what they should have done was make everyone kind of a puzzle boss where you need to figure out the right vantage point
That would have
in
been
the
cool.
world. Yeah, I mean that's what they should have done, because you're right. It like the majority of them were just slice at the heels until it falls over, hit the weak spot, and then rinse and repeat. It was pretty boring.
Yeah. And then the other point I wanted to make is that I appreciate From Software going this direction. Whether you take it or leave it, hate it or love it. I do think though that the DLC in and of itself did less for Elden Ring as a whole in some ways, but in other ways it did
Compared
some
to
good
other DLCs, you mean?
compared to other DLCs, right?
Like Dark Souls 3, like story wise and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess like I just only really when it comes to the boss fights do I feel like it took a step back, but in everything else, I feel like in some ways it took a step forward or it stayed just as good as I expected. And when I think about like people saying to scale it back, like we were just discussing, I think I don't mind them going back to their roots a little bit of doing like a linear game with very specific combat, maybe less convolution with the items that you're collecting and the builds that you're having, and kind of like let Elden Ring sit for a bit and stew and go back to something else like a Bloodborne or a Sekiro or a new IP that has that kind of linear gameplay style. But I still appreciate that Elden Ring is what it is, and for a DLC, this was massive. Like the fact that I paid $20 more than I paid for no shade, Final Fantasy 16 DLC, and
I agree.
And it was like basically it felt like I played this game for longer than I played some games that I paid $70 for that were just
I put
main
30
games.
or 40 hours in this DLC easily.
Yeah, I think I put more, but yeah, it's really amazing. It's probably the biggest and most substantial DLC since like The Witcher 3 Blood and Wine. And that's really amazing. Like, we're talking about a DLC here. We're not even talking about a main game. So that's just, I don't think I've ever seen a DLC do this much. So regardless of the criticisms, it's pretty fascinating. But I would like to see them scale back a little bit and do a more linear style, more streamlined game. Like, my dream would be a Berserk game, straight up a Berserk game.
Ooh.
With the Dark Souls style, or even Elden Ring, but like linear.
I wonder if that's Miyazaki's dream too, to one day do. But okay, yeah. I mean, I think we can all agree that scale back is definitely on everyone's bingo card or everyone's wish list.
Yeah.
Because I'll always harp on it whenever I talk about Elden Ring or think about Elden Ring. There's just too much. Like, on one hand, it's cool that there's so many options, but on the other hand, it sucks that there's so many options.
And it handicaps the design, because like what we're talking about with the bosses, they got to make it difficult for every build. They got to make it difficult for the people who are the mages shooting the one-hit laser beams from the edge of the map. They got to make it difficult for the melee players, et cetera, so on and so forth.
And one thing you can also say pretty much about every FromSoft game is they're never very good at balancing. There's always one build type that stands above the rest, as like, if you play this build, you will cheese the game. Usually that's magic builds, I feel, at least in my experience with the ones I played, but I'm sure it differs.
Yeah, most of the time magic is OP.
Yeah.
But it depends on the boss, right? Because like I had I was using holy damage almost the whole DLC, and then for the final boss he was resistant to holy damage, so I had to go bleed or rot.
Yeah.
Which is part of the reason why they lean into these bosses that are so much faster and have like catches, because in order to be successful with a magic build there, you got to know the attacks still. And it's almost like Black Mage in FF14. You got to know your positioning, where it's safe to cast spells, when it's not, because of the amount of time it takes.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, Jason, what's the Kwasnicki rating on Shadow of the Erdtree?
The Kwasnicki rating is 8.5 Skadutru fragments out of 10. I don't remember what I gave. I might have given the base game 9. I don't think I gave it a 10.
I don't know what you gave it. I don't remember. Also, like, we all know that it is Shadow Tree, right? Like,
yes. I said it in the very beginning. Yes.
Just making sure. Okay. Yeah. For anyone that isn't aware, like, that is an old English way of spelling shadow, and it is pronounced shadow. Because I listened to. Go ahead.
They should have spelled the title like that.
I don't disagree. Then you would have had so many people. Yes.
Yeah, the Skidoo of the Erdtree.
Yeah. Or like, because they called the Shadow Keep SHADOW.
Yeah, that
called the Shadow Field or whatever it was called, or Shadow with Skadu.
There's no fucking consistency. Yeah, Shadow Atlas, right?
Yeah, Skadu Atlas, but it's Shadow Keep in the Skadu Atlas, but they're both Shadow.
Everyone, write to Miyazaki. Tell him, what the fuck were you thinking? Like, get some consistency in your video games, man. Or do we think that this is a George Railroad Martin problem? Do you think he's the one that was like, it's got to be Skidoo?
No, he's only responsible for the incest.
I seriously doubt. Did anybody even say if George R. R. Martin was involved?
No, I'm just kidding.
Because,
guys,
I do not believe he was involved at all in this.
We broke the story in our first episode. Remember, he walked into the boardroom, wrote "Dung Eater" on the whiteboard, and then left. That was it. That was his involvement.
That's probably
more true. Code.
That's probably more true than you think.
Like that's all he did, right? That's definitely it. Wasn't there a character that was just like a letter? Like, their name was just one letter. Who was that? D. Yeah.
D.
That's all. Yeah. That's what he. Yeah. Maybe that was the joke we made in the base game episode. He walked in, wrote D, and then walked out.
It's like that. It's probably more true than you think. It's like that South Park episode with George R. R. Martin. You see, and then you become the Elden Lord. But wait, there's more. Then there's 2 Elden Lords, and yeah.
Anyway, thanks for listening, everyone. If you liked this episode, I usually end the episode saying that. I am so sorry. I'm going to fix that right now. If you liked this episode and you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much. Please like the episode, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment. Tell us, if you say Skadu or Shadow, or if you, I don't know, if you think Melania was being manipulated. Tell us what you thought of this episode and of Shadow of the Erdtree. I don't know. Just leave us a comment. Please be kind. Share the episode with someone you think will like it, with your friends, your family, your kids if they played Elden Ring. Maybe hopefully they're a little older. This is a pretty mature game. Lots of spindly little hand spiders that might scare the little kids. So maybe don't let them play this game and just listen to this episode.
Of all the things to pick out that are not child friendly, it's the hands.
Dude, that's the biggest thing I'm afraid of from this fucking game. So yeah, I'm gonna call out the hand spiders. They're freaky.
Great Delilah quote from this episode. She's doing something with those fingers.
If you listen on Apple Podcasts, thank you so much. Rate and review the show. 5 stars preferred. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you didn't like. And once again, share the show with people that you think will like it. Jason, what's our next episode?
Dead Space 2.
Yeah, in preparation for Spooky Month. We're playing Dead Space 2 next episode. So get yourself prepared.
How much I love aliens, not aliens.
What?
I said, and everybody knows how much I love aliens, not aliens.
Aliens, not aliens.
Because it's inspired.
Yeah, because it's alien, but it's
you're saying that this is aliens, not I see. Okay, yeah. All right. I thought you were saying that you liked.
Come on, Mark.
You liked but didn't like the movie Aliens. I'm like, what are you talking about? You love aliens. But okay, yeah, we're talking about Dead Space 2. Which might be a little limiting for some people. I know it's available on PS3. I don't know if you can stream it on PS3 or on PS5 via PS Plus. I don't know if it's one of those games where you can stream it. But it is backward compatible on Xbox, modern Xboxes. So, and I got it on sale for like $4.
Nice.
Like, that was real cool. So yeah, Dead Space 2, that's the next game. So play that in preparation for October, our spooky month episode. And yeah, thanks for listening.
Bye.
Have a wonderful day, everybody, and be kind to me. I was making criticism out of love.
All right, I'm just gonna remember that 5:40 was when we roughly got started. Okay, are we ready?
Sure.
Hell yeah.
Cool. We're gonna start in 3.
Brother, for the glory of the Emperor.
Is that a Space Marine 2 thing?
Yeah, I'm on. I got halfway through the last mission last night. It's so fucking dope.
Cool.
Nice.
All right, we're gonna get started now.
Sorry about that. It's just in my head. All I want to do is just go finish the fucking campaign.
All right.
I'm like right there.